Hello, welcome and good evening ladies and gentlemen to another round of the NXTCC, known in full as the Next Gen Racing Touring Car Championship for 2022, as brought to you on iRacing, the premier sim racing platform available only on PC. Today marks another round of the calendar which continues to ask the question, which out of our drivers is the best at touring car class racing, and well, the venues we have been to so far have really seen the racing go up every time in terms of its level and quality. Of course, last time out we were in Canada, trying to replicate the speed and thrill of Thruxton with the Canadian Time Motorsports Park, but after visiting Canadian Thruxton, as we like to refer to it, it is the case that we've headed back to the United Kingdom, albeit briefly, for what is the round at Oulton Park. In particular, Oulton Park, Ireland, the circuit located in the countryside of Cheshire. It is the case that this circuit is much loved and much known for its ability to create naturally close racing, particularly in the touring car class, given the fact that it is full of elevation changes, blind apexes, and corners that require full-on commitment for you to be able to set that best possible lap time and get up close and personal. Indeed, it is the case that in terms of overtaking moves here, we'll be seeing our drivers have to really go deep on the brakes if they want to get the move done. There's sure to be a few bumps and scrapes, some elbows coming on out, and well, given the tempo we have seen over the opening 3 rounds, I don't think anyone's going to complain if the racing does get a little bit more rugged tonight, because whilst it may be rugged, it's full of quality, and we've seen plenty of brilliant moments and passes so far, and we're bound to see more tonight. Speaking of tonight then, what is our schedule for tonight? Times in British summertime, that's BST or UTC +1. It is the case in just under 19 minutes time, we'll be getting underway with our 15-minute qualifying session to determine our grid order for the purposes of race number 1. Of course, all 3 of our races this evening being sprint races as per the usual format, and it will be the case that that sprint race will follow straight away at 8:15. 20 minutes in length, it will be then the case that after the racing, we'll take a brief break before returning approximately at 10 to 9 for the build-up to race number 2, and that'll be another 20-minute race, of course, with a slightly different grid in terms of the way it's set, and then we've taken another brief pause before returning for the build-up to race number 3, anticipated at 9:20 tonight, and that will, of course, be the final race with that reverse grid that is drawn on live air. It'll be drawn by myself in the commentary booth as your host and commentator. And speaking of who I am, my name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And it is the case I'll be bringing you all of your racing coverage for the entirety of the season, and well, what a season it has been. Indeed, speaking of coverage, it is the case that you can tune in tonight via 3 media viewing platforms, your viewing pleasure. Firstly, if you are a YouTube user, you can go to youtube.com and search for Next Gen Racing and tune in there. Alternatively, if you're more of a Facebook person, and we do know that Katie Eames, for example, is a Facebook person, it is the case that you can tune in by going to facebook.com/groups/Next Gen Racing. Or last but not least, if you're more of a Twitch person, you can always go to twitch.tv/TX141 and tune in there. But it is the case that, speaking of tuning in, our drivers will be looking to dial themselves in at the circuit in this final warm-up practice session you see going on in the background. But whilst we are waiting for the time to tick down, let's take a look at the calendar so far and what lies ahead. Well, here's the case, of course, that last time out, as previously mentioned, back on the 18th of August, we were in Canada, our equivalent of the first visit to Thruxton, if you will, with Thruxton not being officially available in iRacing. We hope it does arrive one day, but as it was not available, we went to a circuit that looks quite similar in terms of its overall layout and nature. But before that, we were at Brands Hatch Indy in Kent on what was the 11th of August, for the first of 2 visits to Brands Hatch, and we'll be heading back there much later in the season, and our opening round of the season was, of course, at Donington Park National. Now, some of you may be thinking at this point, if you're avid British Touring Car Championship fans, i.e. BTCC fans, this sounds awfully familiar to the British Touring Car Championship calendar for 2022. Well, that's because it is. We are basing our calendar off of the BTCC calendar, indeed trying to get as close as possible to the real-life sport that everybody absolutely loves. Indeed, BTCC only growing throughout the years, and whilst it is the case that our drivers are running touring car class machines, which are purely front-engine, front-wheel drive, and on top of that don't have hybrids, what the official British series now moving to the hybrids format, the racing may not be quote-unquote physically real, but I can assure you it's definitely real, and we have seen that over the opening 3 rounds, and we'll see that again today as of the 25th of August at Oulton Park. After today, it'll be the case that we'll be heading to the Netherlands for the Zandvoort Grand Prix circuit. It was previously the Zandvoort Club circuit, but we have changed the variant to the Grand Prix circuit. It is the case, it was agreed that this would be a variant which is going to produce much more racing synonymous with the British circuit of Croft. Of course, Croft not available within iRacing as it currently stands. We're having to find an equivalent, and Zandvoort is definitely going to be a close equivalent. More on that in a week's time on the 1st of September. After that, we'll be taking a week's break before returning for round number 6, and it'll be Scotland the Brave on the 15th of September at Knockhill. It'll be the case that we kick off in the Highlands in Fife, and well, what a circuit Knockhill is going to be. If it's the case you're expecting undulations and elevation changes, well, Oulton Park is only half of the question, and Knockhill will complete the other half of the question in round number 6. Then we'll be making our way back down towards England for Snetterton, the 300 layout on the 22nd of September, a traditional touring car racing circuit, indeed a much loved circuit as well, much like Oulton Park, albeit different in nature, a much flatter circuit, but one with a greater variety of corners. And then for round number 8, we'll be taking on our second Thruxton round, albeit with Thruxton not being available, we'll be going to the Monza Grand Prix circuit over in Italy for a fast and furious load of racing, and some racing that will be very heavily focused around Slipstream. And after that, it will be the case of the penultimate round on the 6th of October. We'll be heading to the Silverstone National Circuit before bringing it all to a close and bringing the curtain down back in Kent in the United Kingdom at the Brands Hatch Grand Prix variant circuit as of the 13th of October. And indeed, we look forward to each and every round that lies ahead. But before we can go to the rounds that lie ahead, we must get through the present. And well, there's no need to rush getting through Oulton Park. It is the case that this circuit is a strong and brilliant circuit for touring car racing. But before we come on to the specific details of our circuit, it's a good idea to come on to our championship standings as they currently stand. And we start off with the overall championship standings after the opening 3 rounds. Now, we should clarify here, there's been some slight changes. You may recall, last time out, we said in round number 3 that the driver classes were to be finalised following what was round number 3 being completed. They have been finalised, and you'll see here on the overall championship standings, our drivers are now being finalised within their classes. So to give you an example, it is a case running in P3 there in the championship, you have Gavan Gardner, I should say, not Gavin Gardner. Bit of a typo there, but it is the case that Gavan Gardner, who was classified as a Pro-Am going into this series, has now been upgraded to a Pro, and indeed a number of our drivers have been upgraded from Pro-Ams to Pros, and therefore that will be represented here. Meanwhile, when we come onto the individual driver class standings, we'll be seeing those standings as they were updated at the end of round number 3. So before those driver class changes were finalised, so you'll see the likes of Gavan Gardner will still be Pro-Am, and it's only fair that we respect the fact that at the time of scoring those points within their class, they were considered to be Pro-Am, so therefore we will not update those standings to show you the move to the Pro class until round number 5, so in a week's time. So it'll be a bit clearer then, but if you're wondering why we're going to see a couple of drivers switch classes between these standings, it's because our overall standings now take into full account those driver class changes, whereas it's the case that our individual driver class standings have yet to be updated because we'd like to refer back to the last 3 rounds. But without further ado, looking at our overall standings then, it is the case that Jamie Dorey leads on 138 points, 10 clear of Adam Delmont as it currently stands. The 2 teammates, of course, for one of the next-gen racing teams, are both going toe-to-toe time and time again, but it does seem as though Jamie Dorey was able to find the upper hand versus Adam Delmont at the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, albeit it was the case that between the two of them, both drivers having difficult days at the circuit and were not able to pick up the major points they so desperately craved. Indeed, it was a missed opportunity, and third place driver there, Gavan Gardner, able to move up to 105 points and really charging on. And you can imagine that again tonight he will have the bit between his teeth and be looking to pick up some major points here at Oulton Park to put himself in contention for the top 2. However, he's only 2 points clear of Andrew Holmes, and Andrew Holmes no stranger to danger when it comes to battling with other drivers. And if he is in attendance tonight, Andrew Holmes will be looking to get some major points on the board to keep him clear of John Higgins Sr. and also continue to hunt down Gardner and Delmont ahead. But speaking of John Higgins Sr., in P5, it was the case that John Higgins Sr. having a difficult day, and indeed the HSR team all having a difficult day at what was the Canadian Tire Motorsport Park last time out, with the Hyundai Elantra seemingly struggling in those hot conditions. But it was the case that Higgins Sr. was able to pull off some major results towards the end, particularly in race number 3, and on 91 points now, 2 clear of Junior. It is the case that the Higgins family members will be going toe-to-toe tonight, but trying to work together to pick up some major points. Indeed, this is a circuit that should be more favourable for all cars, not just those which work better in hot conditions. But we see Higgins Jr. there on 89 points, having had a difficult last couple of rounds, and we're looking to turn things around tonight, ahead of Chris Daines, who is only 2 points behind. And Chris Daines, of course, the second of the 2 Varano Motorsport drivers of Gardner and Daines. It is the case that Chris Daines picking up every bonus point last time out at what was Canadian Tire Motorsport Park for pole position, and also then the fastest laps in all 3 races. You can imagine Daines will be on all cylinders once again, trying to work with his teammate in order to get those best possible results over the course of tonight. We also see there Matthew Addy in at P8 on 83 points, and it is the case that Matthew Addy right now 4 points behind. A difficult day last time out at Mosport, and he'll be looking to try and turn things around come the end of tonight, given the fact that he's falling backwards towards the clutches of Lee Horn and Mikey Doble, who complete the top 10. Nigel Stott there in P11 on 52 points, the best of the rest outside the top 10. Indeed, a sizable gap of what is there, 27 points between himself and Mikey Doble, with Rob McGregor in P12. And then we do have Ben Bennyworth, followed by Mark Sykes and John Burnham to complete the top 15. Burnham only ahead of Paul Scott based on result countback. Paul Scott in P16, and then it's Edmonds, Thomas Delaney, Mark Arrowsmith and David Whitehouse to complete that top 20. And outside the top 20, but not to be forgotten about, we have Colin Martin, Michael Crees, Josh Brown, Gaz Wheel and Jamie Jenkins completing all 25 drives in the overall standings. Now, whilst we look from those standings to our individual class standings, of course, these reflecting the classes as they were in round number 3. It is the case that Adam Delmont leads going into tonight in the Pro class on 168 points, 5 clear of Jamie Dorey. And indeed, much like we saw in the overall standings, where it was Dorey ahead of Delmont, it is the case it's the other way round here when we take the specific class standings into account. But the key point, they're only separated by 5 points. It could go either way tonight. And well, in terms of Adam Delmont turning up, we haven't currently got him trackside. And if it is the case he's not able to make tonight, well, that is going to open up a major opportunity for Jamie Dorey to be able to pull some major points on his rival and teammate. However, let's not count out Higgins Jr. there on 144 points. As we said earlier, had a difficult day last time out, but we're looking to turn things around here today, given the track will be more favourable to the Elantra. And then we do have Lee Horn there on 130 points in P4, breaking away from Andrew Holmes to a further 19 points away. And then Chris Daines, of course, on the charge with a limited amount of rounds completed so far. The Varano Motorsport driver there on 99 points. And if he's able to continue that form from last time out, he could jump right up into the battle for the top 3 positions come the end of tonight. However, with Matt Emmons on 94 points and Mikey Doble on 79 points, it is the case that Emmons will be looking to try and keep Chris Daines at bay from surging away. And at the same time, if we do have Mikey Doble return, although I don't think he is going to be returning, unfortunately, today, due to a slight personal situation, for what we understand, but all is well with Mikey Doble. I can clarify it's more of a technical issue, as I'm to understand it, rather than a personal matter. But Mikey Doble should be back, hopefully, for round number 5, and we'd love to see him out on circuit, given his flying start in the season opener. But then we come to what is our Pro-Am class standings. And it is the case that John Higgins Sr., or John Higgins as he's known in full, on 162 points. He is clear by 24 points right now of Matthew Addy there and is continuing to lead the way. However, with Gavan Gardner on 131 points, of course, after tonight, it will be the case he'll be no longer in this classification. He'll be in the Pro classification when we update the standings next time around. But Gavan Gardner coming a long way, and you can understand why he's been moved up to the Pro class there in that P3 on 131 points after missing the season opening round. Rob McGregor in P4, ahead of Ben Bennyworth in P5. The two drivers separated by a single point. And you can imagine the HSR driver will be looking to go toe-to-toe with Ben Bennyworth tonight. And then Nigel Stott, John Burnham, Paul Scott, Mark Sykes and Thomas Delaney complete the top 10 there. Indeed, not too far between one another, between Nigel Stott and Mark Sykes. Only 4 points separating the group of 4 drivers. And then Delaney's got some work to do if he wants to get up into that fight for the top 9. Now, outside the top 10, it is the case that Mark Arrowsmith there, only a further 5 points behind Delaney. He'll be looking to try and creep into the top 10. But can he, given that David Whitehouse started to show signs of improving form at the Mosport circuit, particularly in the final 2 races, and Michael Crees on P13. I don't think we're expecting Crees to be joining us as of tonight, but we look forward to when he does return. And then we have Colin Martin and Gazwill completing the top 15, with Josh Brown and Jamie Jenkins completing our Pro-Am Championship standings. But we look from our individual class standings to the Teams Championship, and it is the case that after 3 rounds of racing, NXTGEN Orange lead the way in the form of Doble, Delmont and Dorey on 305 points. They are almost now 100 points clear of NXTGEN Racing Blue, officially 97 points clear after a great set of results, and NXTGEN Racing Blue really struggling last time out at Mosport by comparison. And that has enabled HSR to close up despite their own difficulties at the Canadian circuit. Then in P4 we have NXTGEN Racing Green, 5 points ahead of Prime, stacking with Solo Racing. And you can imagine these two teams will be going toe-to-toe to really try and put that pressure on HSR in P3. And then the best of the rest outside the top 5, we have Varano Motorsport on 86 points. But keep your eyes out for them, they'll be gaining points very rapidly. Crest Autosport with Pebbles in P7, SVPMR with Ignium in P8, and then JBW Racing, last but not least, in P9. But as we then look to our circuit for tonight, our host venue, of course, is Oulton Park, particularly the Island variant. We're not running all the way out to the Shell Oils hairpin, but it is the case instead we have the shorter, more condensed hairpin at turn number 4. This circuit, of course, located in Little Budworth in the Cheshire region of England in the United Kingdom, right out in the countryside. It is a fan favourite circuit for it being right out there in the countryside, but also its nature in particular, as articulated partially by the simracingwiki.com circuit map here, and thank you to them as always for their circuit maps. You can see made up of 12 corners here. It is a circuit which comes very fast with its corners, and indeed it's all about carrying momentum from corner to corner and be fully ready to commit to the next corner. We've got the run through the sweeper of 1, which, whilst we won't see on the circuit map here, we will see in the onboards, has a major dip in the apex depression, and as they make their way through turn number 1, down the hill through 2 and into 3, the long left-hander of turn number 3, where you want to get on the brakes just before the bump in the road as you come out of 2, and that'll set the car up nicely for turn number 3. Get that right, it's the charge up towards the hairpin at turn number 4, breaking into the island hairpin, and as they make their way into the right-hander, the slowest corner on the circuit, it'll be the case of getting on the power as soon as possible out of the corner and charging up towards turns 5 and 6. The chicane, where it'll be the case we can expect some major battles there, and indeed on the open lap, perhaps a major concertina effect. Coming out of the chicane, then the run through turn number 7, the right-hander, where it's about balancing the throttle and just carrying the right amount of speed not to go wide, and then the charge through the kinks of 8 and 9 uphill into turn number 10, the double right-hand apex. It'll be the case turn number 10 could see a number of drives fall off the circuit, given how tricky it is and how high those apex curves are. If they survive turn number 10, it's then the final heavy braking zone at turn number 11, a corner which has multiple elevation changes throughout the corner, under braking, on the apex, on corner exit, and into the dip in the charge up towards turn number 12, which is a major rise into turn number 12, flat out to complete the lap. But more on that, we'll ride on board and show you what a lap looks like in the qualifying session. And as for our rules for tonight, the rules have not really changed. This is a fixed setup series as always, so it is the case that our drivers will be running the baseline setup with a slight fuel adjustment for tonight to ensure they can make it to the end of each and every race, unscathed with fuel capacity. In general, driver classes have been finalised as of round number 3, as we mentioned previously, and let's talk a little bit about those sprint races, of course, to remind you how the grids will be set. Race number 1's grid shall be set based on results of qualifying. Race number 2's grid shall be set based on the results of race number 1. So whoever wins race number 1 starts on pole for race number 2, and the order follows behind. Then race number 3 is where it gets very interesting because the grid shall be set as a reverse grid based on the results of race 2, with the reversal position being drawn live on air between 6th place and 12th place. So if it is the case that I draw a 7th place from the lottery ball machine, it will be the case that 7th place will start on pole, and the winner from race number 2 will start in P7. However, if you finish P8, you start P8, you do not benefit from the reverse grid. And as for penalties and whatnot, in any of the races, a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 20 or more instant points. Well, that's enough rules and regulations. Then you know what you're all here for. You're here to see the drivers out on the circuit, and let's go to the circuit. And indeed, we do have a couple of drivers making their way on around right now, and we do see here Chris Daines in particular flying his way out to turn number 4, and as he does, it is the case the Danishman charging down this back straight, and well, it is the case we can see there some of our timing towers not updated for those latest class adjustments, so we will be pushing an update through in due order. That will come very shortly, but in the meantime, as we see the Danishman here from Varano Motorsport, the fastest driver in this final warm-up and practice session by 1.5 tenths over Jamie Dorey on a 1:27.371. That could be a sign of way things are to go tonight. We do say hello to you guys and girls that are tuning in and in the chat, and if you are tuning in and have access to the chat, do not be shy, feel free to say hi. We don't bite here at NXTGEN, and here's the case we can see Richie Pink there in the YouTube chat wishing everyone the best and saying he's on vacation, so he should be able to watch the races today. That's absolutely great to hear, Richie, and I hope you're having a great vacation. And in the Facebook chat there, we do have Katie Eames saying it is her favourite track, and well, it is the case. That's a very good track to pick for your favourite track. Oulton Park, definitely one of the solid ones up there, and indeed it's so famous in terms of its race. It's even on the British GT Championship calendar, and my goodness, we have seen some very dramatic races in the British GT Championship calendar over the last 2 to 3 years, none more so than this year's race, which I think was settled after a lawsuit, unless I'm very much mistaken. But we also see there's Katie saying it's our local track, being from Preston, absolutely love it, and glad to hear you're doing well, Katie. And Richie Pink saying let's go, I'm ready in the YouTube chat. That's the spirit, Richie, we do love it. But as we do look to Gavan Gardner here, and here's the case, of course, Gavan Gardner being promoted to the Pro Class, so we should get that reflected, and it will be very shortly reflected. Here's the case, we're just a little bit behind there with our class updates, but they are gradually coming on through, and we can see there is the case Gardner now being reflected with the green sash there. And in terms of how you can understand on the timing tower who's a pro and who's a pro-am, it is the case that they've got a green sash, much like Gavan Gardner has here, against his name, so between his position number and his name, then that represents he is a pro, whereas if they have got a purple-pink sash, that means that they are a pro-am. And the one in yellow, the S car, that is our safety car, being driven by Gaz Williams. Here's the case, we may see a safety car or two here, given the close-knit nature of the racing at Oulton Park, and we will have that manual official safety car run by NXTGEN Racing's official safety car driver. He's not quite out there in the pit lane at the moment, the car's just parked up, but the Porsche Cayman 718 GT4 is ready to be used should it need to be implemented. As we do see Aaron Smith here making his way out of turn number 10. He does have Mark Sykes tucked in behind right now. In fact, that may not be Mark Sykes. My apologies. That's Lee Horn. In fact, I'm so used to seeing Mark Sykes run in that very definitive orange and light blue chrome colour. But as he makes his way out of the final corner, you can see Aaron Smith here battling with Lee Horn. Both drivers getting toe-to-toe, and they've come together a little bit. And, well, that is a bit unfortunate, and they've come together. And, well, goodness me, Mark Aaron Smith getting away with that one there. And Lee Horn, I don't think, in a very happy mood after that one. I think Aaron Smith as well making his way to the pit lane, because it is time for us to go into qualifying. Well, 15 minutes. Who will come out on pole by the end of it? Let's find out. As we do wait for our drivers to make their way out of the pit lane. Indeed, it will be a mad scramble. We can see here Jamie Dorey will be the first driver to head on out, and as he comes charging on out the pit lane here, the number 13 driver, unlucky for some perhaps that number, he'll be hoping it's not bad luck for him, but at the same time as he comes roaring down through turn 2 and into 3, Jamie Dorey's got a lot to do here, and in the absence of Mikey Doble, who was forecast to be returning tonight but is not returning, it is the case that Dorey does have a huge opportunity. On top of that as well, we do not have, as I'm to understand it, Adam Delmont in attendance tonight. So it is the case that this will work out quite nicely for Dorey if he's able to put it together with two of his rivals not present. This could be a major points haul on the cards, but at the same time he does have Gardner and also Daines to deal with, and the Varano Motorsport drivers will not be holding any quarter when it comes to trying to put in strong performances, such as the way they've been driving over the course of the season. But as we do see here, Dorey making his way out of the chicane and through turn number 7, now heading up the hill. It is the case the pro driver here getting ready to go on to his first flying lap as he heads up towards turn number 10. But as we see Paul Scott here, all of our drivers gradually making their way on around, and as they come roaring on through, it is the case that Paul Scott here making his way into the chicane, the number 85 driver, looking good so far, albeit we didn't quite see him get the results he wanted earlier in the season, but perhaps he can do so today. We jump back to Dorey here, who as he makes his way through the final corner, we now ride on board for his first flying lap of this session. Heading across that timeline in and up towards turn number 1, onto the brakes he'll go very shortly, and as he does, rolling the car in on the brakes here, bringing the car through the right-hander, looking very smooth there from Jamie Dorey as he now heads his way down the hill towards turn number 3, and he rolls his way into the braking zone here, trail braking into the apex, and coming through at that left-hander, keeping it nicely hooked up, and making his way up towards turn number 4, into the hairpin very shortly, and as he makes his way into the heavy braking zone here, it is the case, getting it hooked up very nicely indeed, brings the car on through, and now charges down the straight, heading up towards turns 5 and 6. But as he comes charging on down at this point, it is the case now, it's a bit of a breather before he has to go slamming on the brakes into the chicane, and as he heads on into that apex there of turns 5 through 6, and now it brings the car over to the left for 7. It's one of those cases where he feels the car understeering coming out of 6, he has to bounce the throttle, and in order to make sure it doesn't understeer out to 7, and now charging his way up the hill towards turn number 10, through the double kinks of 8 and 9, and as he heads on through here, is the case now braking for turn number 10, the double right-hand apex here, bringing the car into both apex curves, just a little bit of creep away between the curves, that's a perfect line, and now heading up towards what is turn number 11, the final corner, as he makes his way on the brakes down into the corner here. It will be the case he'll be looking to have a good run on through, and as he heads up towards that timeline, what's it going to be for Jamie Dorey here as he crosses the line? Well, that'll be the first lap in, and it's going to be what is a 1:28.159 as he rolls his way on through turn number 1. But can anyone go faster? That will be the big question. And well, speaking of going faster here, I believe it is the case that we have had a bit of an off track for one of our drivers, and that was Mark Arrowsmith only one moment ago. Let's take a look back at what happened. We're on his way into turn number 1, his first flying lap there, and then he went a little bit wide, brought the car back on the circuit, but that will be considered to be an invalidated lap straight away. And such is the nature of the track limits here at Oulton Park Island. The track limits are incredibly aggressive in terms of the fact you put more than 2 wheels beyond that white line, you will be punished for it. A lot of the curbs here would make you think that you can run wide and actually put 3 wheels off track. Not to be here. The track limits, much like in real life, very strict at Oulton Park, and well, it is the case the MSV circuit owned by what is the Palmer family. It is one of those cases where they want to preserve that countryside, and therefore those track limits are very strict compared to other circuits, compared to say Oulton Park, for example, where you can see our drivers really trying to abuse those curves, both the apex curves and also the runoff areas, and not to be here today as our drivers continue to try and put those qualifying times in. But as they do, it is the case here. We see Paul Scott in the Audi RS3, and well, in terms of the balance of this circuit or what we can expect from our drivers, we are expecting this circuit to be able to pander to all 4 cars, whether it is the Hyundai Elantra, the Hyundai Veloster, the Audi RS3 or the Honda Civic Type R. Each car should have its own strengths and weaknesses here, and when I say that, that does sound a little bit obvious, but not in terms of what we saw at Mosport, where the Elantra in particular really struggled by comparison with the other 3 cars. Here we should see that all 4 cars have about equal performance in terms of that lap time, and it really does come down to our driver's approach and min-maxing those abilities or those capabilities behind the wheel of the car in terms of knowing what the strengths are and maximising those and minimising or mitigating the weaknesses of the car. And as Paul Scott there goes P3 for the time being, looking good so far is the prime driver as he makes his way through the Kinker 2 and down towards turn number 3. But we can see there it is the case. It's a Honda on provisional pole right now, 5 minutes into the session, 3 Audis then from second to fourth, and then it is the case that we have Higgins Jr. in the Hyundai Elantra, the HSR, currently in P5, but we've still got plenty of lap times to come on in yet. It is the case that our drivers have still got plenty to deliver, and we are waiting to see what comes as the time wears on. As we watch here, Higgins Jr. making his way out to the right-hand of 7, and Nigel Stock goes provisional pole on the Civic Type R with 27.960. It is the case the Crest Autosport with Pebbles driver puts in a strong lap there, and he needs that after what was a difficult day last time out, of course, at Mosport, where it just did not come together. But as our drivers roll the way on through at this point, it is the case that still plenty of time down on circuit, and with that the rubber will be laid down. Track temperature will come up as well. That may aid some drivers, it may hurt them depending on how quickly that track temperature comes on up. It is a pleasant day here in the British countryside, and that means we can expect our drivers to have plenty of time in order to set some good laps. As we see Lee Horn there jumps up to P3 on the 28.005, and we see it is the case that Higgins there, well, it was Higgins Senior who actually improved, and Chris Daines jumps up into provisional pole, 2 tenths clear of Stock. But speaking of drivers who've yet to set a time, well, I was going to say David Whitehouse, but he's just set a time in the throwback Elantra liveried machine there, thrown back to, of course, the 90s Super Touring Car era in BTCC with the Renault machine, albeit that is the Elantra as he gets it a bit wrong. They're taking a bit too much apex cover too, and catches the car very well. They just about brings it together, and I think Mark Arrowsmith, not wanting to feel as though he's being left out, decided to follow suit. That almost was a bit synchronised, it must be said, albeit they're not teammates even though they're running the same livery. But it is the case there, the 2 Elantra drivers both getting it wrong in the run down towards turn number 3, albeit Whitehouse there catching the car at the last moment, and now they're both going to have to set themselves up for another lap. As they make the way on around, we look to Mark Sykes here in the Hyundai Veloster, and our Veloster driver right now currently in P11. But the key thing to note here, and remember what I was saying earlier about how close it will be between the cars, well, you can see apart from that 1.5 tenths delta between Chris Daines and teammate Gardner in P1, P2, from P2 all the way down to P6, it is the case we have 5 drivers separated by less than a tenth of a second, and then from P6 to P10 we have got essentially Lee Horn in P6 to Thomas Delaney in P10, separated there by what is only half a second. So it is close, and that lap time will continue to come as the session wears on for all of our drivers as they're concerned. But as they make the way on around, it is the case. We see Matthew Addy here. Well, we can see, I believe that is Arrowsmith pulling off to the side to yield the space, and as they roll the way on out, it is the case that right now Addy doing everything right as he rolls his way to the line. And well, is he able to improve here, or will it not be the case he's able to improve? Heads into turn number 1, and no, he does not improve this time. But speaking of improvements, I have noticed that we do seem to have a little bit of a desynchronization between our circuit map in the top right corner of our screen and the drivers out on circuit. We'll look into that technical issue before we do go racing, ladies and gentlemen. Something has gone slightly wrong there, and we'll make sure that's fixed before we go into the race. But right now, it does seem to be the case that Addy doing everything right as he heads down to the braking zone here for turn number 4. Rolls his way on through. It is the case that we're looking at to continue to improve, and we're coming out of that first sector, that first 2 subsectors now. Well, it did not improve too much in sector 1, did in sector 2, and he's got the draft here of one of our Elantra drivers just in front, although whether that is going to be a blessing or a curse, it's up to him to decide as he makes his way through the chicane, and out to turn 7 he rolls, and as he heads up the hill at this point, Addy, of course, one of our good midfield drivers here in terms of the battles and being right on the midfield pace, has hasn't quite worked out the way he's wanted it to over the last couple of rounds, and we have had actually confirmation that Addy has moved up to the pro class as of going into this round, and it is the case he'll be reflected as a pro very shortly. But for Addy, much like many of our drivers, it is the case that with these class changes that will be on their mind in terms of the fact they're now competing at a higher level, and therefore they've got to step it up, Addy included, as he makes his way to the timeline. And does he improve this time around? I don't think he's going to improve. No, he stays where he is for the time being. But we do look from him to Andrew Holmes here, the Lancia driver, making his way out of turn number 3 and down towards 4. And as he charges them down at this point, Holmes, of course, our pro driver, rolling his way through turn number 4, currently in that P14 position, qualifying not going his way currently. He'll be looking to try and improve on that qualifying result as the time wears down. But what can he do with less than 5 minutes on the clock now? We'll have to wait and see as he rolls his way into the chicane. And as he comes on through, we're trying to bring the car nicely through it. And he does indeed actually bring it nicely through the chicane. He brings it out onto turn number 7. Now heading up the hill towards turn number 10. It's looking a smooth lap so far for what is their Holmes. But he's still got plenty of time to go here. So it's the case it's not done yet. And well, we'll have to wait and see what happens through turn number 10 here. As you can see, the car naturally wanting to understeer with so much speed on the carry through into the corner, but as he heads down towards what is a turn number 12, now heading into that heavy braking zone. Well, in this case, turn number 11, I should say, only one major corner separating him from the completion of his lap, and he heads to the timeline here. What's it going to be as he comes to cross the line? It will be an improvement, or won't it? Where he comes across, and it's an improvement to P9 there. He finds the lap time, and it is the case that Holmes moves up to a 28.323. And as he heads down towards turn number 3 at this point, it is the case that if you're wondering why our time tower keeps refreshing, it is the case we are working on some technical fixes in the background for that time and desynchronization issue. And so you will every so often see the graphics disappear and then reappear. But that's nothing to panic about, ladies and gentlemen. It is the case that we are just trying to resolve those issues for you and make sure you get the best possible quality of broadcast that you deserve. And speaking of deserve, I think Josh Brown at this point, we've seen as though he doesn't deserve to be in at P16, but perhaps a little bit higher up the order, but still the time and work is going in here for Brown as he rolls his way through turn number 4. As he heads out to the corner here, we can see it, one of our Audis going slow, and I believe that is Burnham going slow there, making his way down towards turn number 5. And no, in fact, it's not Burnham. We're just trying to see who that was. I think that was actually Bennyworth going slow. My apologies. And as we see here, Mark Sykes coming through, a flash of lights there from Jamie Dorey, and Jamie Dorey is trying to come through like a bullet here into turns 5 and 6. But what he's going to find is a mass stockade of cars all getting ready to go onto some of their final laps, and he won't be too pleased about that, given the fact he bumped into that traffic at a short notice. As he makes his way up towards turn number 10, we look from him to what is our Lancia driver of, is the case we'll be looking at to David Whitehouse here as he makes his way up towards turn number 11 and into the braking zone he goes. And as he rolls away, and he's got Brown behind him there for company, they head out of the corner, and we ride on board here with David Whitehouse for another qualifying lap. So heading up towards turn number 1 here, 2.5 minutes still on the clock, and into the braking zone for 1. Looking to his left-hand side, they're using the advertising boards as his indicator of where to brake. Making his way out of the corner there, using the maximum possible width on exit before heading into the Kinker 2. Just missing that apex curve, and now braking just before the dip in the road. You can see it at the bump in the road before the road drops by a level, and just missing the apex curve slightly there, but still a nice run through turn number 3 and heading up towards turn number 4. And well, on this one, it's the case that looking for a brake marker, that brake marker being just beyond the rise in the road, and as he makes his way through the turn 4 hairpin, exiting out the corner, and now charging down towards turn number 5. It's been a smooth lap so far, not a perfect one, but it has been smooth from Whitehouse. And now he heads onwards towards turn number 5 as he almost hits the rev limiter there. Now braking into turn 5, braking just after 100 metres, but about 80 metres from corner apex of 5, bringing the car over towards the left-hand apex of 6, and then back over to the left-hand side for turn number 7. Rolls the car on the throttle there through turn number 7, and now heading up towards turn number 10 through the double apex crest of 8 and 9 as he makes his way underneath the bridge, and now into left-hander 9 before setting the car up for turn number 10. Dabbing on the brakes here, coming down the gear to 4th gear and rolling the car through, and now making his way up towards turn number 11. Not much longer left in this qualifying session for our drivers, but Whitehouse here looking for his brake marker, and he'll be using the corner marker board there on the left-hand side to act as a marker for about 100 metres, and as he exits out the corner here, nicely done, and now up through the rise at 12. And what's this lap going to be for Whitehouse? I don't think it's going to be a major improvement, but never say never, to be fair, and it is the case Whitehouse does not improve. But then again, look at how close it is from pole position to Mark Sykes in P14. It is 1 second. It is the case we have 14 drivers separated by a second as Whitehouse gets it a bit wrong there on turn number 2. But meanwhile, we do look to Higgins Senior here coming through turn number 7. And right now in P7, one of our drivers who got promoted to the Pro class as of the previous round. And it is the case he'll be looking to carry on with that momentum as he rolls his way on through the corners. But will he be able to here in terms of that championship momentum? Well, my gut feeling says yes, it is the case that Higgins Senior has been putting in those great performances throughout. And now what can he do here at Oulton Park today, as he will be I think he may just creep onto another qualifying lap. He will just about creep onto one more lap with the 15-minute timer about to close, and it closes now. And it is a case that Higgins goes on to that final lap, and he did improve then to a 28.018. And has he got some more improvement here to move himself up a position or two? That will be the big question. But as he heads out to turn 1 down towards 3 here, the Elantra driver's got it all to play for as he makes his way through on this final lap. And indeed, we've got times coming in. We have just had Paul Scott come across the line. Paul Scott did not improve. What about Jamie Dorey, however? It is the case that he is on a lap that's looking to be a personal best. We've got Daines, Gardner, Scott and Stock in the pit lane. So our top 4 are not going to put any more laps in. But it is the case as Jamie Dorey comes to the line. Was it an improvement? Was it not? No, it was not an improvement from the end. And Ben Bennyworth did not improve either. Well, we've still got Higgins Senior making his way around, but before we do, we see Gaz Will here making his way out to the final corner. And as he heads up towards the timeline, we'll be looking to see if he can improve. Can he improve? No, he cannot by the looks of things. It's not an improvement for Will. We've still got a couple more laps to come. We've got Lee Horn here heading to the timeline. In fact, he's heading to the pit lane. He's decided enough's enough. He can't improve anymore. And then we've got Thomas Delaney here heading to the timeline, currently P11. Can the prime driver move a bit further up the order? I don't think he's been able to. No, he can't. And Aaron Smith does move up a place ahead of David Whitehouse. And then we've still got Higgins Senior, our last driver to come on through to complete this qualifying session. And as he heads to the timeline, can Higgins Senior find a bit more time to move from P7? No, he cannot. Well, that is qualifying complete, ladies and gentlemen. And whilst we do have a quiet moment, we'll be right back. We're just going to try and fix those technical issues off screen. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and hopefully those technical issues have gone away, or they will be resolved shortly. We have all our drivers jumped to the pits, and now we're going to form the grid for the purposes of race number 1. So let's take you through that grid before we go racing for the first time. So looking to our grid then, it is Chris Daines ahead of Gavan Gardner. It's the Varano Motorsport lockout on that front row here today in race number 1 of round 4 of the NXTCC at Oulton Park. In the end, Daines taking pole by 1.5 seconds over his teammate. Behind them, Paul Scott lines up P3, the prime driver there, alongside with Nigel Stock, who starts P4. They're great qualifying sessions from the pair. And then we have Jamie Dorey and Lee Horn, who line up on row number 3. The 2 pro drivers there from Next Gen Racing teams, Next Gen Racing Orange ahead of Next Gen Racing Green. We have John Higgins there, who lines up P7, and that is John Higgins Senior, who is joined by Matthew Addy on the 4th row. Andrew Holmes and Ben Bennyworth complete the top 10 there, P9, P10, with Thomas Delaney and John Higgins Jr. John Higgins Jr. having a difficult qualifying session. He lines up P12. Behind them, it is Matt Emmons and Mark Sykes on row number 7, followed by Mark Arrowsmith and David Whitehouse, the 2 pro-owned drivers running the identical Elantra livery, starting P15, albeit for different teams. Then we have Josh Brown and Gaz Will starting off our 9th row, and it is the case we then have John Burnham and Joseph Hewson, who complete our final row, our 10 rows. We have 20 drivers taking to the grid, and well, now we wait to go racing here in our first race of the day. And well, what a race it is going to be. There's no doubt about that, as we do say hello there to Majir Nesta 98 in the Twitch chat. Hope you're doing well, Majir, or Mr. Nesta. And it is the case as we do wait to go racing here at what is a packed grid of 20 cars. Who will come out on top by the end? We are only 20 seconds or so away from getting the green light to go racing. And, well, when we do, it will be the case. It is going to be a mad dash down through turn 1 into turn number 3. And who will come out on top? Who will it be who leads our field up towards the hairpin for the first time? Will it be Chris Daines from pole? Will it be his teammate Gavan Gardner? You can imagine they'll be looking to work together, much like they did at Mosport. Or could we see a surprise in store? Well, the gridding process is complete, and now we wait for the lights. 1 red light, 2 red lights, 3 red lights, 4 red lights, 5 red lights.
Green, green, green.
And it's the lights out, and away we go for race number 1 here at Oulton Park. And immediately it's the case that Chris Daines gets a good start here. But look in the back of the Elantra of Holmes charging to the inside there into turn number 1 as they come on through. It is the case that Holmes gaining multiple places at the start with a brilliant launch. And as they make their way down towards turn number 3, it is the case of roaring on down for the first time. And we can see there the HSR car of Higgins Sr. having to look on the inside versus Lee Horn. He gains the place as there's a little bit of a coming together. Oh, goodness me, that's Matthew Addy off circuit as they make the way on through. But Addy returns here. But meanwhile, as they make the way into the hairpin, we can see everybody coming in on a hot here with cold tyres and cold brakes. And everyone trying to survive that initial run as Dave Whitehouse also involved in that open lap incident. But meanwhile, we must look back towards our leaders right now as they charge down the back straight here in towards turn number 5. As they roll the way onto the brakes here through the chicane, we can see Mark Sykes having to go defensive. And meanwhile, somebody really struggling on the brake, and that's Matt Evans, who are really having a difficult time bringing the car back together. And we're hearing that Chris Daines is having some connectivity issues. And it is the case that Chris Daines has supposedly gone off track. We'll give you an update on that very shortly. But meanwhile, Ben Bennyworth here side by side with Lee Horn in the run through turns 8 and 9 into 10. Bennyworth up the inside of Lee Horn. And Lee Horn is only going backwards at the start of this race. He's lost 3 places already. But if Bennyworth can get this done as they make the way up towards turn number 11. And Nigel Stock here trying to go around the outside of Paul Scott. Of course, these two starting on that second row together. And as they make the way out the corner, they're still side by side in the run down towards turn number 1. But as they head under braking here into turn number 1, it is the case that Gardner ahead of Dorey, followed by Nigel Stock with Paul Scott on the inside. But look at this, Higgins Sr. trying to go around the outside of Paul Scott for P4 as they roll the way through the first corner. We stay with them as they head down towards turn number 3, and as they do, Paul Scott right now is yielding slightly, and we can see that Andrew Holmes also looking for the move, and Holmes up the inside here, and Holmes an absolute flyer of a start, and now trying to take that P6 position. But it is 2 by 2, hurrah they come as they make the way up towards turn number 4, and you can see John Higgins Sr. here going around the outside of Nigel Stock, beating the Honda on the brakes, which is very rare, but that shows you the confidence that Higgins Sr. has in the car. And Holmes falling back here versus what is Paul Scott, as meanwhile Holmes versus what is their Higgins Jr. And Will Jr. on the inside here as they make the way into turn number 5. I think he'll have this done. Holmes won't be able to go too wide through there, and indeed it is the case that Higgins Jr. gains the place. But meanwhile further back we can see here it is the case that Josh Brown taking the position of what is Matthew Addy there for P12. A nice move from the JBW Racing driver, and I can confirm that Chris Daines is in the pit lane. There was some sort of connection issue by the sounds of things, and as a result it is the case that Chris Daines is currently being worked on in the pit lane as we're to understand it, as our drivers make the way on through. But as they roll the way on around right now, it is the case all of our drivers, well, we've got a driver running wide there, and that was, I believe, Matt Evans getting it a bit wrong, but we must look from them to a bit further up the road. And in particular we can tell you that Tom Delaney has jumped to the pits as well. Something's gone wrong with Tom Delaney. He's just rejoined and jumped to the pits. But meanwhile look at this, Andrew Holmes, they go on to lap number 3 up the inside here of Paul Scott as they roll their way through turn number 1, and as they do, getting the move done. He wasn't able to get it done last time around, but he's got it done this time as we ride on board here with Paul Scott, who looks to make the return move. As we ride on board with our P7 driver here, the Next Gen Racing Blue driver, not able to find the inside into turn number 3. I think that would have been bold. Instead, he's got Lee Horn. Watch the left-hand side of your picture. Lee Horn's going to try and come on through here under brakes, and he goes around the outside under braking, but it's very tight on the brakes there for Paul Scott. And it's the case in the end, he had to out-brake Lee Horn without tapping the rear of Holmes, and that was perfectly judged by the Next Gen Racing blue driver of Scott. It was the case just about braking at the right time, and as they come charging down, we can see it is the case a bit further back. We do have here Josh Brown having to hold off Matthew Addy, and the JBW Racing driver at this point, he knows he's gained some key places. He's gained 5 places since the start of this race, and he's not going to give these up. It is the case that you can defend quite comfortably here at Oulton Park. As we said earlier, this is a circuit which requires you to push very hard in order to be able to make a move and make it stick, and that's exactly what's being done here. As we see, hold up a second, that's Nigel Stock off circuit. Now, what on earth has happened to Nigel Stock? We're not sure, but it is the case. In terms of our drivers right now, as we look back up towards our leaders, well, here are your 2 leaders right now, Gavan Garner and Jamie Dorey. And as they make their way across that timeline and onto another lap, there's no safety car so far. It is the case we'll continue to go racing, and Garner under pressure here. And, well, Jamie Dorey trying to squeeze Garner every corner here, and Garner's reacting very well to it as they make their way down to turn number 3. But as they make their way down through 3, we'll very shortly be taking a look back at what exactly happened to Nigel Stock. With that, here comes the replay with regards to Nigel Stock, and it was contact there with the number 5 car. It was John Higgins Jr. Well, it's the case, we didn't expect that to happen, but it is one of those situations where the 2 drivers have come together. Now, if we take a look back at what happened in this battle, Nigel Stock earlier on in the lap, coming down towards the hairpin here, well, that was the case that we can see that Higgins Jr., well, was gaining gradually, but it was a long way to go. And as they made their way out of their hairpin here, was there a mistake from Stock that really built up to this? Well, as they made their way down towards what was the chicane on this lap, and that was, of course, on lap number 3 only moments ago. There was no change there, and that's where Stock had difficulty, struggled into the chicane, and I think this was the point then where, as they made their way up the hill, now you're going to see Stock put the car in the middle of the road. Now he brings it back over to the left, and as they head on through, oh goodness me, well, now that was Higgins Jr. trying to get his nose in there, and he would argue that Stock cut his nose off, but I think Stock would argue I didn't give him the outside there to take it, and well, that's a difficult one. But meanwhile, we cut back to live pictures, and just in time, because it is the case that Jamie Dorey are trying to make the move around the outside of Gavan Garner as they head into turn 1. This is for the lead of the race, and as they make the way on out, Dorey is ahead, he's got his nose ahead, and he's made it count here as they make the way down towards turn number 3, and Jamie Dorey into the lead of this race with just over 5 minutes complete. We've still got just under 15 minutes to go, but as they head up towards turn number 4 at this point, it is the case that Gavan Garner, well, I think right now just focusing on trying to keep the car in the zone. We do know that the Honda is switched on much more quickly compared to the Audi. It does take a good 5 to 7 minutes, as Chris Daines was telling us about in the post-round interview last time at Mosport. It was the case that the Audi takes a long time to get up to temperature and get up to speed, whereas the Honda almost switches on automatically. It just needs 1 or 2 laps to get into its ideal zone, and Jamie Dorey definitely capitalising on that as they make the way through at turn number 7 once again. As they head the way on through, we can see here that after going off at turn number 10, that contact with Higgins Jr., it is the case that Nigel Stock trying to regain a place, and David Whitehouse here for P15 as they make the way under braking into the chicane, and it is the case that Whitehouse, they're passed on the inside by Nigel Stock into turn number 5, and I think Whitehouse staying with Stock now to try and use him to pull him up to the next driver up the road, which is Gazwill, who's running in a happy P13 right now as the Next Gen Racing green driver as he heads through turn 9 and up into 10. But as they make the way on around, we look from them towards the front of the field, in particular the battle for P4 here, which is John Higgins Jr., who is ahead, of course, of Andrew Holmes in that P4 position, albeit Higgins Jr. will have a little bit of a spectre on his mind, given the contact with Nigel Stock. I think he would argue that it was the case that it was an opportunity, he went for it, and it wasn't to be, so be it. But as they make the way down through 2 and into 3, it is the case right now, he can't think about that. The Briton just has to think about one thing, and that is moving forward. And well, to move forward, he has got what is a 2.5 second gap to Higgins Sr., and he'll be chasing down Higgins Sr. gradually, his teammates, of course, as they make the way in to the hairpin. You can see here how everybody's stacking up. Concertina in under braking in to the island hairpin, and well, Lee Horn here finds himself right in the middle of a group of 5 cars as they come charging on down towards what is the chicane. And don't count out Mark Sykes here, who is creeping closer to this battle as the battle wears on through lap number 6. And as they make the way out of the chicane this time around, I think Sykes will be one to watch out for, for later in this race. Perhaps in the last 5 minutes, that's when he'll come alive and try to deliver on those moves as they make the way on through. But as they come charging on through this time, it is the case that Mark Sykes heading up towards turn number 10 and not quite there at the moment. But meanwhile, speaking of being there at the moment, we ride on board and look back from our leader's car. This is Jamie Dorey who we're riding on board, and we're getting a face full there of Gavan Gardner's Audi RS3 as they make the way out of the final 2 corners and on to another lap. And of course, it is the case that Gavan Gardner was our leader for some time after Chris Daines went to the pit lane. It was the case that Chris Daines, who is a lap down, and he's still in the pit lane as I understand it. Well, I'm not 100% sure what's happened to Chris Daines other than the fact it has not gone his way. But as they roll the way on through here, Gavan Gardner taking the lead off of his teammate in that instant. And, well, Jamie Dorey finding his way on through at turn number 1. Only a couple of laps to go. But as they make the way out of 3 and up towards 4, it is the case here that Dorey feeding that pressure, but keeping it comfortably at bay at the moment. But meanwhile, we look a bit further back here, and Lee Horn up the inside for P6 versus Paul Scott into the hairpin, looking to get that run. But of course, Paul Scott now will be able to use the Audi's acceleration in order to come back at Lee Horn, and immediately Lee Horn thinks about pulling over to the right there to defend to the inside, but then recognises, I think, that the run's a bit shorter than the traditional run if it was the full Oulton Park layout, and as a result he does not have to worry as much about going defensive with Paul Scott being a bit too far back to consider the move. But definitely a bit of a worry there for Lee Horn in terms of he's worried about the pressure from behind. But as they make the way up through turns 8 and 9, you can see here it is the case that Josh Brown, who's recently left the pit lane, now finds himself with all the leaders trying to come on through. Josh Brown a lap down and, well, in a bit of an uncomfortable situation. But speaking of uncomfortable situations, Jamie Dorey, our leader, under pressure from Gavan Gardner as they come into turn number 11. Now as they make the way out the corner this time around and head towards turn number 1, you can definitely see now that we're past the halfway point, Gavan Gardner is in the zone in terms that Audi is up to speed and is going hunting. But keep your eyes on where's Higgins Senior in P3. You see him there in the rear of the camera. He is gradually creeping closer to this battle for the lead. Little by little, he took a couple of attempts out on that lap, and he's been doing so over the last couple of laps. I would not be surprised if come the final couple of minutes, we potentially see Higgins Senior in this battle for the win, because he's putting in a lot of good laps right now. And also on top of that, the top 2 are battling, and they're not battling overly hard, but those battles are costing them time in relation to the rest of the field as they make the way out of the hairpin this time around. But as they do, we look from them to Mark Arrowsmith versus Matt Emmons here. And Emmons trying to make the moves. Arrowsmith outbrakes himself into the hairpin. Bit of contact there with what is Addy, and as they make the way up towards turn number 5, you see it is the case that Chris Daines, who is a lap down, he's back out on circuit. Well, Chris Daines at this point, I think, having to deal with the fact that he's just going to have to use this race as a practice race to get some more laps in and get a feel for where that grip is in the race conditions. And, well, a bit of a difficult one for Chris Daines in this opener, but still 2 more races after this one, so I think he will just think about what lies ahead. But speaking about what lies ahead, in front of him is Matthew Addy trying to overtake what is Mark Arrowsmith for P10. And the elbows are definitely coming out between these two as they make the way through turn number 10. But as they roll the way down, oh goodness me, a bit of contact, then there's a reverse contact there from what is Arrowsmith on Addy. Now, did the two of them come together in that sequence? They're both pointed the wrong way. I would imagine they're both going to try and get it to the pit lane, as we see Arrowsmith there letting the car roll on the grass down towards the final corner. But I think with that damaged tyre and that damaged front suspension, I can't foresee Addy making it to what is the pit lane by himself. I think he may need to get the tow, and that was a major collision between the two of them. But meanwhile, we've got Andrew Holmes here looking a bit further up the field, holding on to P5 as it currently stands. And as they make the way up towards the hairpin, we can see it's the case that Lee Horn taking a peek to the inside, but he thinks about it. No, he can't go for it, just not quite close enough. But as they make the way down towards turn number 5, it is the case that we can see Holmes really now having to think more about rearguard action than chasing after Higgins Jr. in front, as it is the case that whilst Higgins Jr. is gradually falling back towards them little by little, now that the battling is commencing, it's going to go the other way in terms of Holmes will be more focused about holding on to that P5. And as they make the way up the hill, we ride on board here with Lee Horn as he chases after a top 5 finish. They make the way into turn number 10 here. 7 minutes still on the clock, plus the final lap. You can see how Lee Horn trying to stay as close as possible on the wheel tracks there of Holmes, but Holmes getting the better run out of turn number 10, looking comfortable in that Elantra and heading into the heavy braking zone now for turn number 11 as they come down to second gear, and as they roll the way through corner apex here, Horn getting a much better exit out of turn number 11 by comparison, and trying to stay as close as possible as they make the way up towards turn number 1, heading towards that braking zone. In this case, Lee Horn's just going to have to wait once more as he fights the steering wheel there to settle the car down and point it in a straight line, trying to look for that move in towards turn number 3. I think he's a bit too far back to go for it. Instead, I think his focus will be more on the move into turn number 4 if he can hook it up on exit here as they make the way out of the corner. And in fact, Higgins Jr. has fallen back a little bit more to this group over the course of the lap so far, and Lee Horn here just waiting. He may have an opportunity to pounce for 2 places right at the end if he acts patiently enough and waits his turn. But that's the thing, will he wait or will he want to jump and go for just that P5? We'll find out very soon, because there's not long left to go. And speaking of not long left to go, here's the case that Jamie Dorey will be hoping that time left to go goes a little bit quicker than it currently is, given the fact that the Britons still under pressure from Gavan Gardner as they make the way out of turn number 7 and up towards 10. And as they charge on through here, of course, battling for the overall lead and the Pro Class win as well. Dorey holding off Gardner as it currently stands as they make the way through turn number 10 and up towards 11. But we have seen Gardner has these little bursts where he takes a look, he thinks about it, and I think he's just trying to keep that pressure on and wait for when the opportunity is right. He'll be analysing right now, where's Dorey stronger, where's Dorey prone to be on a bit edge, and conversely, of course, Dorey will be looking in his rearview mirror every so often to see where Gardner gets the run and we may need to park it on apex or a particular corner. But as they make the way down towards turn number 1, we can see here Lee Horn battling on the outside with Andrew Holmes for P5. Holmes on left of your picture, Horn on the right, and as they make the way into turn number 1, Lee Horn definitely getting the better run out of the final corners. I think now Lee Horn feeling as though the car is there, and it is the case that P5 is for the taking. But the noticeable thing here is that Higgins Jr. really just not able to break away from this battle, and in fact it's becoming a 4-way battle, in fact a 6-way battle for what is P4. Well, I shall correct myself there, because that is a car that's battling. That is Paul Scott there. I thought that was Josh Brown for a second. My eyes do deceive me, but it is the case that they make the way out of turn number 4. It's one of the cases where Higgins Jr. has now got a huge amount of pressure behind as they roll the way down towards turn number 5, and as they do, Mark Sykes here in P9 battling with Ben Bennyworth. And really it should be said that Mark Sykes, one of our biggest gainers in this race, the biggest gainer of them all is Higgins Jr., who's gained 8 places after a dismal qualifying session. But Sykes has gained 5 places since the start, and right now looking to gain 1 more as they make the way up towards turn number 10. But as they charge in towards 10, we can see it is the case that Higgins Jr. under major pressure right now. He made a brilliant start, and as we ride on board the gearbox here of Higgins Jr., the one thing that's really noticeable here is how Lee Horn, I think, is having to really control himself in terms of the fact he's looking for that move on Holmes, but every time he looks to the move, he gives Higgins Jr. an opportunity to try and break away. You can see it again here, Holmes going defensive into turn number 11, and what that's doing, it's opening up the gap to Higgins Jr. Not by much, but it's buying a couple of attempts, and a couple of attempts at Oulton Park is a lifetime in terms of your ability to defend or not have to go on the defensive line into a particular corner, and that's what Higgins Jr. wants. He wants Holmes to focus more on defending, coming offline and costing the drivers behind time, because of course then they'll battle one another and Higgins Jr. can just run off into the distance with his P4, but he's definitely struggling for lap time right now. He is lapping on average 3 to 4 tenths slower compared to Higgins Sr., his teammate up the road from him in P3, and compared to the drivers behind, his lap times have fallen away to a degree, and that means right now Holmes, Horn, and also on top of that Scott and Benny all want this P4 off of him, but will they be able to find it? That is the question as they make the way down towards turn number 5, once again in towards the chicane, and you can see how in the long train here Mark Sykes has fallen back a little bit, but I don't think he'll be too phased. He's still got opportunities, and they've still got a good couple of laps to go before it is the case the checker flag comes on out. Now as they make the way out to turn number 7 here and up towards turn number 10, and once again Ben Bennyworth holding on to that P8 as it currently stands. Ben Bennyworth, to be fair, putting in a good solid performance here in the Audi RS3. He's known for those performances now, and he's got a reputation which he's living up to, and as he makes his way through turn number 10, it is one of the cases of the number 96 driver pressing on and trying to think about potential opportunities here right at the end. But speaking of opportunities, there's now only going to be another 2 laps, perhaps a 3rd lap if we're fortunate. No, it will be 2 laps, and I can confirm in this case we've got 2 laps to go, and Jamie Dorey holds onto the lead right now by only 3 tenths ahead of Gavan Gardner as they head down towards turn number 3. As they come running down the hill this time, Gardner, of course, in those very distinctive pink, purple wheel arches is the case. Wheel arches, I should say. No, it's not the case. Those rims, I should say. My apologies. And looking a very, very distinctive Audi RS3, and he wants to be as distinctive as possible in the rear view mirror of Jamie Dorey for the simple reason to try and distract him as they make their way out of the hairpin. You can see Gardner getting it hooked up a little bit better there by comparison, but there's nothing between the two of them as they make their way down towards the chicane once more. They've got a bit of traffic ahead in the form of Matthew Addy, but Addy, to be fair, is 5 seconds up the road. I don't think he's going to be a factor in this battle for the win in terms of potentially being there at the final hurdle. As they make their way through turn number 7, we look from them to Andrew Holmes here, and we can see it is the case. The number 16 driver still under pressure from Lee Horn, and I think Lee Horn at this point now has to really think about just going for that P5. I do not think that it's going to be the case. He'll have an opportunity to snatch P4 as well off of Higgins Jr. He's got to go all in because Holmes right now is not making the headway I think the pack behind him were expecting, and therefore it's all for him to do now in terms of Holmes needs to come on through. And as they make the way up towards turn number 11, you can see here Holmes running a little bit wide at turn number 10, and as has to go defensive here into the penultimate corner, and with less than a minute to go we are on to the final lap here, and Dorey leads ahead of Gavan Gardner, but we focus here on the battle for what is a P4, and Andrew Holmes having to defend versus Lee Horn for P5 in the run towards turn number 1. No change at the moment, but meanwhile we look to our leaders here, and Gavan Gardner all over the back of Jamie Dorey coming out to turn number 3 as they head up towards turn 4. Dorey goes defensive here. He's got a poor run out to turn number 3, up towards the hairpin they go. It's a battle on the brakes, and Dorey's going to squeeze Gardner as much as possible to the outside, but of course remember it is the case that Gardner can afford to go deep. Meanwhile, further back it is the case that we can see here no change for the battle for P4, but I say that, oh goodness me, and it's the case there. That was Higgins Jr. going deep, and Lee Horn finding the side panel of what was Higgins Jr. coming out of the corner, and that's his race, dropped all the way down to P9. That's very unfortunate for Lee Horn, who's running very solidly in that battle for P5. Meanwhile, up in the leaders right now, it is the case. We see Jamie Dorey still being hounded left, right and centre by Gavan Gardner as they head through turns 8 and 9. Up towards 10 they go, and as they roll the way through the right-hander, it's the case that Gardner looking to try and get the move done, but he's not close enough. He's going to have the run into turn number 11. He's going to have to go in on the brakes if he wants it. Alternatively, he's going to try and get the run out the corner, and indeed the check of land awaits whoever leads to the line, and it looks as though it's going to be Jamie Dorey here for as they make the way out of the final corner. He flashes lights, he knows he's done it. Jamie Dorey takes the win in race number 1 just ahead of Gavan Gardner. It'll be John Higgins Sr. who takes the final step on the overall podium, and then it'll be Andrew Holmes P4 ahead of John Higgins Jr. P5, Paul Scott P6, Ben Bennyworth P7, Mark Sykes P8, Lee Horn P9. Matt Emmons will then come on home in P10 there. We briefly saw Chris Daines coming on through a lap down in P16. Matt Emmons completes the top 10. Well, it's been a difficult race for Next Gen Racing Green, particularly Matt Emmons, and then we'll have Nigel Stock in P11 recovering to P11 after that instant at turn number 10. And David Whitehouse and then coming through to take P12 here. Strong race from David Whitehouse, albeit I think we can expect plenty more from him in the next couple of races. And then we do have Mark Arrowsmith will come across the line in P13 shortly. Not to be this race at 4. Mark Arrowsmith had some difficulty at the start, but of course we do have 2 more races on the cards, and I think finding his feet as he makes his way to that timeline. And as he crosses it, he'll take his checker flag for P13, and then it will be the case that we'll have Gazwill coming on through to P14. Dropped it off circuit towards the end from what I'm hearing, lost out on the P13, but still makes it to the end. And then it will be Matthew Addy, who is our last driver to come on through to take P15 in short order. But what a brilliant race, albeit it was the case that most of the action was towards the front of the field inside the top 10, but still plenty of racing action. And with Addy taking that P15, we can expect plenty more action in short order, because race number 2 is going to be coming up very soon. But as we see Matthew Addy roll his way through turn number 1, is the case the results are in, and let's take you through those standings, subject to, of course, stewards' inquiries. So it is the case then after race number 1 in round number 4 of the Next Gen Racing Touring Car Championship here at Oulton Park, Ireland today. Jamie Dorey taking the win in the end by only 1.5 tenths over Gavan Gardner. John Higgins Sr. there completing the top 3 in terms of the overall podium and also the pro podium, with Andrew Holmes P4 in a battling P4 right to the end, and John Higgins Jr. P5 after that mistake going down into what was the island hairpin right at the end, and that cost him dearly in the hunt for the P4. Paul Scott, P6, in the end taking the win in the Pro-Am class in this race ahead of Ben Bennyworth and Mark Sykes, the trio completing what is the Pro-Am podium, and then Matt Evans P9 and Nigel Stock completing the top 10. David Whitehouse P11 ahead of Lee Horn in P12, and then Mark Harrismith P13 with Gaz Will P14 and Matthew Addy P15 to complete our top 15 and all the drivers who finished on the lead lap. Chris Daines P16 in the end after what was a technical issue by looks of things, or a major off track on lap number 1. In the case of Chris Daines dropping a lap down but making his way back out onto the circuit to be classified for the results and classified for race number 2's grid. And then Josh Brown P17 there with that midpoint retirement. Tom Delaney with that early retirement P18. And I do believe it is the case that we did not have John Burnham or Joseph Hewson take to the grid for the purposes of race number 1. I think there may have been technical issues with the cars and we do hope to see them in race number 2. But it is the case. Just before we do jump over to the build up to race number 2, let's take a quick look back at what exactly happened in that battle into the final run of that hairpin on the final lap. Well, it is the case as we take a look back. Well, this was Higgins Jr. going overly deep under brake and just carrying too much speed into the corner. And then there was the contact with Lee Horn. So in the end, it was Higgins Jr. just simply out-braking himself. And Andrew Holmes saying, thank you very much, don't mind if I do. And well, I think Andrew Holmes, I'll be very grateful that he was not the one to succumb to pressure. And instead, it was Higgins Jr. But of course, still plenty of racing to come here. And we will be back, ladies and gentlemen, within the next 5 minutes or so for the build-up to race number 2. Don't go anywhere, you won't want to miss it. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back then for the continuation of round 4 of the NXTCC for 2022, and it is the case now we move on to sprint race number 2. You can see that on the schedule, and it is the case that we're getting underway with the racing in just under 4 minutes time. All our drivers have been given the opportunity to join the lobby and get ready to go racing, and well, it is the case, some of you may be wondering what exactly happened to Chris Daines, because we saw him one moment and then he just seemed to disappear off the radar and jump to the pits. Well, it was the case that going through the chicane you can see in the background briefly there, you'll notice there is a tyre barrier on the apex of turn number 6. Well, it is the case that, well, that tyre barrier was clipped by Chris Daines, and, well, he sheared the car off completely straight. In fact, I think it was at the turn 5 barrier rather than turn 6, but regardless, made contact with the tyre wall there and took the car off the road, and that's what happened to Chris Daines. And Thomas Delaney did the same a lap later, so it is the case the chicane catching many a driver out, which was very unfortunate. Now, it is the case, of course, speaking of things that catching people out, if it hasn't already come to your attention, it is the case you may be caught out by the fact that we do have a new website here at NXTGEN Racing. It is the case that we've upgraded our website for all of our information in terms of the series we run, what we represent, and what we do within the sim racing world and the wider motorsporting world. And if you do want to know more about the NXTGEN Racing community, you may want to go to nextgenracing.co.uk, as it is the primary source of information. But indeed, it is the case we have all of our series on there in terms of upcoming and current series, and if you want to know more, do check out our website. Once again, that website is nextgenracing.co.uk. Don't be caught out, be there first, be the first one to make the way to the website, and it is the case, of course, you'll be first and not last, much like our drivers who won't want to be last here in race number 2. And well, it's the case that Jamie Dorey, after that brilliant battle to the win versus Gavan in race number 1, he'll be now looking to do the same. He'll be starting on pole, of course, for what is the purposes of race number 2. And can Jamie Dorey make it 2 out of 2, or will it be the case that he finds himself coming unstuck given the fierce rivalry from Gavan? But of course, Dorey will have one thing to his advantage, and that is that the Honda does activate much more rapidly in terms of those tyre temperatures and brake temperatures compared to what is the Audi of Gardner, and that's what we'll be using to try and break away nice and early and then use that advantage to give enough distance that later in the race, should Gardner manage to find the pace to come back at him, it may be too little too late. And of course, going from one driver who had a brilliant win in the end to a driver who put in a solid drive, albeit it came unfounded right at the end, Lee Horn, we can expect plenty more from him. He'll be starting just at the bottom of the top 10, and after that contact with John Higgins Jr. at the end of race number 1, he'll be hoping that this time around that contact's not there, and instead he's able to find those places. He's definitely got top 5 pace here today. He's shown that in the race, albeit not making that mistake there would help. It is the case that once he gets himself all set and running, you can imagine he'll have a very good chance here of making it a top 5 in race number 2. And well, what else to watch out for? We'll do watch out as well that Gaz Will does seem to be really now starting to come up to speed with the car. Indeed, a rookie to the series, and indeed very new to the world of iRacing and touring car class racing on iRacing, as I'm to understand it. But Will definitely showing that pace and a good finish in P14 last time out, and let's see if he can go a little bit higher and perhaps even creep into the top 10. And much like David Whitehouse, as mentioned by Richie Pink in the YouTube chat, Whitehouse recovering very well, and he did indeed in race number 1. Couldn't quite crack the top 10, but watch out for him in this race. He'll be looking to get a good start and make his way up the order. But as our drivers make the one around in this final warm-up session before we go into race number 2, it is the case we do see Paul Scott here. And Paul Scott, a driver we haven't really talked about too much in the opening rounds, but coming alive here again today. And the Audi RS3 drive definitely looking competitive for a top 5 finish. And can he pull it off in race number 2? That will be the question on his mind, indeed all of our minds, as he makes his way up towards turn number 10. As he comes charging on through here, the 10-minute window does complete. The check flag is out on this final warm-up session, and now we'll transition very shortly over to the formation of our grid for race number 2. So as that grid is about to be formed, we will very shortly take you through the grid standings, and indeed, here we go. For race number 2, this is your grid. So starting on pole, our winner from race number 1, Jamie Dorey from NXTGEN Racing Orange, lined up alongside by Gavan from Varano Motorsport. Behind him on row number 2, we have John Higgins Senior and Andrew Holmes who make up that second row, and the HSR drive versus the privateer. That's definitely going to be one to watch out for in the run to turn 1. John Higgins Jr. joined by Paul Scott on row number 3. The prime driver Paul Scott there doing very well in race number 1. Can he make it another winning class in race number 2? Ben Bennyworth and Mark Sykes, the two prime drivers starting on the 4th row, followed up by Matt Emmons Adams and Nigel Stock on the 5th row. We then have David Whitehouse and Lee Horner and Rowe at number 6, being followed up by what is Mark Arrowsmith and Gaz Will at P13, P14 on row number 7. And then it is Matthew Addy and Chris Daines on the 8th row. Chris Daines looking to do it all in a recovery drive here in race number 2. And it is Thomas Delaney who starts last but not least in P17. And with only 17 drivers making it to the grid this time, but the gridding process is complete. Now we wait for the lights. 1 red light, 2 red lights, 3 red lights, 4 red lights, 5 red lights. Let's lights out and away we go for race number 2 here with Jamie Dorey getting a good start versus Gavan Garner, who gets quite a slow start by comparison as they make their way down towards turn number 1. And as they do, Andrew Holmes immediately up the inside of Higgins Senior here. He knows he needs to pounce early and not let HSR put the pressure on him. But as they make their way down the hill towards turn number 3, will that pressure come on now as they make their way down into the right hand, into the left hand they go, and as they roll the way on through, Higgins Senior continues to defend here as they make their way up towards the hairpin. This is brilliant racing between the two drivers as they head towards the braking zone. We've got a car from the rear of the picture. That's Whitehouse, I believe. That's Arrowsmith, in fact. But as they make their way through what is the hairpin for the first time asking, Higgins Senior muscled out there by Andrew Holmes, and Higgins Jr. comes up through instead. Now they drag race their way down towards the chicane for the first time asking. We see Bennyworth versus Paul Scott behind them in the battle for P6, and Paul Scott defending here under braking. They head on through. It's going to be very tight, but as they make their way through the chicane, everybody survives. Albeit you can see Chris Daines here already up to P10. He's gained 6 places since the start. He's trying to gain more here, but he's got a lot of traffic in front of him as we ride on board here with Chris Daines, who tries to go around the outside. Lee Horn on his right, and then in front of him he has got the whole plethora of drivers as they roll the way into turn number 10. Lee Horn still on the right of his side of his car, and as they make the way through the right-hander at turn number 10, can't find his way through it right now. He looks to continue the battle here as in front. We've got Scott versus Bennyworth continuing to turn number 11, but Daines has to play the patience game here and wait his turn. As right now, it is all kicking off in front, although I say that with the fact we can see that Horn and Evans both getting slow runs out the corner. Could he try and go for a double move here as they make the way into turn 1? Well, Bennyworth's going to go defensive for P6, but as they roll the way, and you can see Daines giving a little bit of a push there to Emmons, and well, it is the case. Emmons that goes wide, but that contact on the rear from Daines as they make the way down towards turn number 3, but as they roll the way down the hill, oh goodness me, and that's Delaney getting it wrong, and the car's loose. Oh goodness me, he's taken with him Matthew Addy there. Well, that was very unfortunate for Matthew Addy, who was literally a bystander in that, and SVPMR with Ignium driver Delaney not having a good day at Oulton Park in race number 2 either. But meanwhile, we see here it is the case, looking back up towards what is the battle to be just within the top 10. Chris Daines battling side by side here with Emmons as they make the way up towards the chicane for the second time of asking. Daines on the inside, Emmons on the outside. I think it will be the case that Daines will get this move done this time around as he moves up to that P9. But as they roll the way on through, it is the case. We've got quite a bit to dissect. And speaking of dissecting, we start off with what happened to Mark Arrowsmith at the start of the race. This was in the run down towards turn number 3, and Arrowsmith taking a bit too much apex curve to it, unsettled the car and sent the car on its way. Very unfortunate for Arrowsmith, and a whack to the wall there, and he returned to circuit shortly after. We return to our live pictures for a brief moment. We can see Lee Horn here trying to put the pressure on Paul Scott for P7. Paul Scott going a bit deep into turn number 11 there, and we are just going to reload our overlay. You'll notice that we are missing what is our circuit map on the top right corner of our screen, but it is the case, it returns, and as we return the overlay, Lee Horn having to go defensive here for P8 into turn number 1, and Daines is continuing to fly. We know that Daines is arguably the fastest driver over a single lap. We saw that in qualifying, and given the pace that he's demonstrated in the Audi at other circuits, you can imagine that he'll be looking to be the fastest over the entirety of the race. He tries to muscle his way up the inside of Horn, coming through turn number 3, but Horn not phased by it. Defends the inside, coming down towards 4 here. Lee Horn going fully defensive. Emmons watches from behind, and Lee Horn's going to have to defend this hard if he wants to hold the position. But the problem for Lee Horn is the fact that he's got Paul Scott not too much further up the road, and that means that under braking he can't really outbrake himself into the hairpin through fear of tapping Paul Scott on the rear, so he's got to go heavily defensive right now. And as they make their way down into the chicane, you can see Daines going for the cutback there through turns 5 and 6, not able to find it, and Lee Horn keeps Daines at bay for now. But as they make their way out to the corner, both drivers go deep. They both take a bit of a rally cross line here, and as they make the way up the hill, Nigel Stock is going to try and part the seas. No, he's not in the end. He's just going to try and go around the outside of Matt Evans into turn number 10, and he does so there as they make the way up towards turn 10. So Nigel Stock gains another place. He returns to P10 as they make the way out of turn number 10 and up towards 11. You can see Lee Horn continuing to be under this ferocious pressure. It's an absolutely relentless assault from Chris Daines as he tries to close Lee Horn as much as possible to corner apex. They both tuck elbows here as they make the way through turn 12 and to the timeline. It's still side by side. My goodness, when is one of them going to give it in if at all? As they make the way into the opening corner, and it looks though Lee Horn there drops it behind as they make the way through one, and Chris Daines in the end was not going to give up until he got that place. And now Nigel Stock says, well, it's my turn to play. And as they make the way down through turn number 3, Nigel Stock in his P10 knows he's got the pace to be up there towards the top 5. He's got to try and press on here to make it count, as it is the case that right now Lee Horn I think will be licking his wounds after battling with Chris Daines for that P9 position. Sorry, P8 position I should say. And as they roll the way through the right hander at turn number 4, no change this time around. But speaking of no change, it is no change up front. We still have Jamie Dorey who leads, but now we're 5 minutes into the 20. It is the case that Jamie Dorey's advantage in that Honda Civic in terms of that ability to switch the car on sooner will now start to fall away, as it's the case that the Audis will be up to temperature by the end of this lap, and Gavan Garner knows that. He's still there within 4 attempts as they roll the way through turns 8 and 9 into 10. And of course now both of these drivers within the same class with Garner being promoted to the Pro class following round number 3 last week, and therefore it's the case that for Gavan Garner he'll be looking to try and deliver as much as he possibly can as they make the way in the run down towards turn number 11. And as they roll the way through the right hander here, it is the case that Jamie Dorey holding on for the time being, but you can imagine for him it's one of those situations whereby the Briton has got everything to do. As we see Garner there doing a little bit wobbling side to side, I think he feels though he needs a bit more temperature. Further behind, however, in the battle for P3, this is Andrew Holmes versus Higgins Jr. And it is the case that Andrew Holmes now having to go toe-to-toe with the younger member of the Higgins family once again, after I think he was hoping that he would pass Higgins Sr. and it all be done. He did that on the opening lap, of course, but much to the contrary, it is the case now that Holmes under pressure. As we ride on board here with Andrew Holmes for P3, the problem for him is he once again finds himself in this proposition whereby it's either give the position up and then trying to hold on, alternatively he's got to defend for the remainder of the race. And I think in Andrew Holmes' mind here, he feels he can't catch Garner and Dorey. Instead it's all about being the best of the rest in P3, and that is very telling of the fact that he's defending hard so far. And right now Higgins Jr. I think is only teeing up to up the aggression a little bit more, albeit in a fair manner of course, but we do know that Higgins Jr. when he wants to make a pass he can be firm if needed, but to be fair that's what touring car racing is all about. It is the case you can be firm with these cars, you can make contact, not Destruction Derby style contact, but it is the case a bit of door rubbing does not go amiss. And as they make the way through 9 and into 10 here, it's the case we can see Andrew Holmes goes a little bit deep into the first apex. He doesn't quite bring the car back to the second apex at turn number 10. Holmes is feeling the pressure here, there's no doubt about it. But as they make the way down towards turn number 11, just behind Higgins Sr. staying with this pair, but moving this speed, we look away for a brief moment. It's the case Andrew Holmes goes a bit deep into 11, and this is the opportunity that Higgins Jr. needs. He needs a good run into 1, and if he can now turn 1 here, Andrew Holmes goes defence in the middle of the road, brings it back onto the racing line at the last possible moment, and Higgins Jr. takes a little bit of a sniff to the inside. He can't quite get his nose in there fully to contest the space, and of course we've already seen what happens when you try and stick your nose into a place in Oulton Park. It is the case it goes very, very wrong indeed, and we saw that much earlier on for Nigel Stock. And as they make the way through turn number 3 and up towards 4, it is the case that Higgins Jr. continues to charge. As they head into the hairpin here, we look from them to a bit further back, and in particular to Lee Horn here in P9, who is being chased by the aforementioned Nigel Stock. The last star runners in the top 10 is the Pro-Am driver for Crest Autosport with Pebbles, and a bit further back we do have Matthew Addy here, who is trying to put the pressure on David Whitehouse for P12 as they make the way out of the hairpin. And with Whitehouse getting a bit of a slow run out the corner, and the Civic now in the drag race, Addy's going to be on the inside into the braking mark for turn at number 5, and Addy's going to try and get this move done using the stronger brakes of the Civic up the inside, moves up to P12 there, Whitehouse down to P13. But as they come through, we look a little bit further up the road, and Ben Bennyworth here right now under pressure for P6 from what is behind him, Paul Scott. And these two Audi drivers, to be fair, no strangers to one another in this round so far. It is the case we have seen a lot of the Bennyworth versus Scott rivalry over the course of race number 1. It continues here in race number 2, and we're almost at the halfway point right now, and Chris Daines behind. It is a trio of Audis, and the fastest of those Audis arguably is the one at the rear of the group right now, out of position after that disaster in race number 1. And as they make their way across the timeline this time around, what the Danes are going to have to think about here is how quickly does he make this move, given the fact that Scott and Bennyworth are so close together and are also trying to one-up one another. And I think Daines has just got to go for it here. He's got to stick himself between the pair of them, throw caution to the wind and say, I'm coming through whether you like it or not, and it's up to you if you want to defend it, as they make their way out of 3 and up towards 4. Now as they come charging on down towards the hairpin once again, you can see how Bennyworth getting a bit away from Scott, and Scott in fact on the outside, then Daines sees the inside line, he goes for it under braking and gets it done, and Paul Scott doesn't battle it too hard. And I wouldn't be surprised there if in Paul Scott's mind what he's now hoping is that he can tuck in behind Chris Daines, who is the faster driver, and simply use him to be pulled up to Bennyworth to battle a driver who is in his race. There's this thing, of course, if you're not aware of it, sometimes there's this notion within racing, both in real world motorsport and sim motorsport, called racing your race rather than somebody else's race, and that's what I think we've just seen there from Paul Scott. I think he respects the fact that Chris Daines' pace is on another level, and because we've got so much time before the end of the race, Paul Scott defending versus Chris Daines is only going to do one thing, and it's going to destroy his race time versus the drivers he's competing against in terms of pace, particularly Ben Bennyworth. So instead he's let it go, and he's trying now to use Chris Daines' move that's up coming on Ben Bennyworth, we'd have to imagine, in order to open the door for him to potentially get the move as well on Bennyworth for what will be effectively P7. But meanwhile, whilst we wait for that to occur, we do look here to Jamie Dorey, our race leader, who right now under pressure still from Gavan Gardner as they make their way out of 1 and down towards 3. And as they do so, once again, we saw this in race number 1, where Gardner, after being passed by Dorey, stayed there continuously within 3 tenths or so, and it's happening again. But speaking of it happening, in this case, Chris Daines up the inside here of Ben Bennyworth, but he doesn't get the move through 3. In fact, it's a poor run out the corner, and Paul Scott here decides to tuck him behind and give Daines a little bit of a push along here, I think, to say to him, go on, you can do it, I need you to get me close. But he goes deep into the hairpin, and Paul Scott there has to stamp on the brakes as Daines brings the car through the corner. My goodness. And with all that, now Paul Scott is going to be passed here by Nigel Stock, coming out of turn number 4 and up towards 5. And as they make the way up towards turn number 5, it is the case that right now Lee Horn gains a position as they make the way all the way down towards turn number 7. And as they roll the way through the right-hander here, it is the case that Lee Horn making the moves. He's gained 4 places, and he's looking to gain plenty more. And speaking of gaining, Chris Daines now trying to go for the move on Bennyworth in the run to turn number 10. He's going to be on the inside of Bennyworth into the right-hander, and well, Bennyworth here tries to hang it around the outside. That's great from Bennyworth, but it doesn't work. He hasn't got the momentum. It was the case if these were mid-engine rear-wheel drive cars, he could potentially go for it, but not for front-wheel drive front engine cars. They understeer naturally, and Bennyworth, I think, found a face full of understeer, and in the end had to bring the car back to heel as he makes his way out of turn number 12 and down towards turn number 1. But as he does here, it is the case that Bennyworth right now has got the pressure of Lee Horn behind, and that pressure will grow as they make the way through at turn number 1 and up towards 3. 8 minutes left on the clock plus the final lap, and that pressure is growing up front as well, with the fact that Jamie Dorey here still keeping the Varano Motorsport machine of Gavan Gardner at bay is the Next Gen Racing orange driver. But as they make their way through turn number 4 this time, you would have to imagine with Andrew Holmes so far back by comparison, 3 seconds back from this pair, it is the case that Jamie Dorey's got it all to do in his own impetus. Meanwhile, we see here it is the case that Nigel Stock gaining the position on Paul Scott, or does he? It's a race down towards turn number 5, and Paul Scott in the draft, but Nigel Stock critically has the inside and the brakes on that Honda into the chicane. But in the end, Paul Scott gets the place back, and we only caught it right at the tail end. Let's take a look back at how that move was attempted by Nigel Stock. Well, it was in the run down towards turn number 4. You can see Lee Horn on that inside, and Paul Scott thinking about trying to go around the outside there, having to leave the door open. And in the end, as we caught it on live air, it was the case that in the drag race, Nigel Stock just not having the run. And as we ride on board here, you'll see the perspective, the difference in that straight line speed between the Audi and the Honda. And Nigel Stock trying to outbrake Paul Scott there, but within a limit. He wasn't trying to keep his nose in there for the two of them to come together. Nigel Stock trying to be intimidating, but no more than that. But indeed, it is hard but fair racing. It is a case that Ben Bennyworth right now will need to deliver some hard but fair racing if he wants to keep what is Lee Horn behind him as they make their way through the right-hander turn number 1. And Lee Horn now trying to get his nose in there, trying to upset Bennyworth's rhythm, but this is some of the best racing we've seen from Bennyworth this season, and he's an absolutely brilliant driver by default, and now he's really taking it up a level here today at Oulton Park. And as we see Lee Horn having to now defend versus where's Paul Scott behind the Next Gen Racing green driver under pressure from a fellow Next Gen Racing drivers. They make the way into turn number 4. Nigel Stock stays behind right now, but Nigel Stock, I think at this point, the Crest of the Sporting Pebbles driver, knows he's got to try and capitalise when these two come to blows, for the simple reason that Honda just does not have the straight line speed. It has the cornering, it has the brakes, but it doesn't have the speed down the straights, and that's what he needs to be able to affirm the position versus Paul Scott, because that Audi absolutely flies out of the corners, and that's the problem that Nigel Stock is facing. But of course he's still got time to go, not long to go, and remember we do have that random draw reverse grid in terms it could be anywhere between P6 and P12, so all those drivers right now we're trying to get a little bit further up the order to guarantee they're in that reverse grid. But right now as they come down to turn 11, this is the first sign of a move from Gavan Garner on Jamie Dorey for the lead of the race, and as we ride on board here with Gavan Garner making his way out through turn number 12, that was the first sniff. He's still got 5 minutes plus the final lap to go. I think Gavan Gardner has sort of said after race number 1, you know, I let you have the win in race number 1, now I'm going for it in race number 2. Dorey, of course, we're thinking, okay, he's going for it early this time, I've got to be ready for those potential moves. And as they roll the way down through turn number 3 at this point, the Audi Sport Customer Racing Varano Motorsport driver of Gavan Gardner definitely feeling racy here in race 2. He wants that win, you can be sure of it, because to be fair, 2 back-to-back P2s will be great, but now that he's competing with Jamie Dorey in the Pro class rather than competing in the Pro-Am class, Gavan Gardner now knows he needs to take every point he can off of Dorey. It's not the case they're battling for an overall championship, they're also battling for what is the class championship. But as they make the way down towards turn number 5, and no move at the moment, we're hearing that Nigel Stock has been involved in a moment with what is, I believe, Paul Scott, and Paul Scott's all over the back of Lee Horn here in the route towards turn number 5. Something has happened to Nigel Stock, and we're going to find out what exactly has happened very shortly. In fact, I do believe we're about to get a replay of it, but meanwhile, before we do, we can see Matt Emmons there. There's a case battling with Matthew Addy, the 2 Next Gen Racing drivers going toe-to-toe. I think Addy has just got ahead. Well, Emmons is going to try and come on through here once again, but he loses out in the run out of turn 7, so he's going to stay in P12 for now. But firstly, we'll take a look at what happened to Nigel Stock. Well, this was only moments ago in the charge down towards turn number 4, and as they came down onto the brakes here, oh goodness me, now I don't think there was contact there. I think Nigel Stock trying to go around the outside, dipped a wheel onto the grass and slamming the brakes on hard, the car just let loose. And then meanwhile, what happened in the battle between Matthew Addy and Matt Emmons? Well, this was only moments ago, and well, in fact, we're about to catch it here as they make their way down to turn number 5. Addy on the inside, Emmons on the outside, and Addy up the inside there for P11. A nice move from Matthew Addy, gaining another place. That's 4 gained by him since the start of this race. But as we return to live pictures now, it is the case that we can see Emmons here trying to stay with Addy, but right now, Addy seems to be gradually pulling away. 3 minutes still on the clock, plus also the final lap to consider. And well, up front, I can tell you that since we last looked at it, Jamie Dorey has opened up a slight advantage to Gavan Gardner. That gap now up to about half a second, albeit it's oscillating between 4 tenths and 5 tenths, and that shows you how Jamie Dorey right now having to push on and Gardner having to do the same as they make the way towards the end of this lap. But further back here is Andrew Holmes, and remember earlier we were saying about the pressure that John Higgins Jr. was leveraging on Andrew Holmes, but now you've got another member of the Higgins family trying to put pressure. It's Higgins Senior as well, and I would imagine that Higgins Senior at this point, indeed HSR, will have team orders in place to say do not battle one another, only battle if you can make your way past Andrew Holmes. And to be fair, HSR really come alive today. They talked about it in the post-round interview, Higgins Senior in particular saying about the fact they wanted to come back strong after what was a difficult day at the circuit of Mosport last time out, and they are showing that here in the fact that they are putting in the work. And both of the members of the Higgins family right now running in the top 5. We absolutely love it as they make the way out of turn number 1. Of course, it is back to the norm now of the junior member of the family, Higgins Jr. leading ahead of Higgins Senior, but to be fair, both drivers looking very strong, and well, that is a testament to how far they've come over the course of the season so far. But as they make their way through, we do look to Lee Horn here, who right now is trying to gain one more place from Ben Bennyworth, and Bennyworth, your leader in the Pro-Am class right now in terms of that Pro-Am class battle, and you imagine that he's going to be able to keep Lee Horn between himself and Paul Scott behind. And well, if Bennyworth can do this, it'll be a great performance from Bennyworth in terms of picking up a winning class here in race number 2 as they make their way down the back straight. 1.5 minutes left. The leaders right now making their way up towards what is turn number 10. So it's the case we'll have one more lap after this one, and Lee Horn definitely trying to build that pressure, but where can he deploy it to its maximum effect? Well, I think he's got to try and do it in the run to 11. Alternatively, he's got to try and get it done in the run towards turn number 3. And speaking of applying that pressure, of course, we look to our two leaders. And here is Jamie Dorey leading into the penultimate corner on the penultimate lap as he rolls his way through the right-hander here. Dorey looking comfortable at this time, but of course he's got one more lap to go now, and it could be all worth for naught if it is the case he drops it at all on this lap. Not that we're hoping he does, of course, but the pressure is now on. White flag is out, and Jamie Dorey leads going on to the final lap here in race 2. Meanwhile, further back, we can see it is the case in the battle for P7. Bennyworth leads, Lee Horn is in P8, and Paul Scott P9. And Paul Scott right now wants to try and take a shot at Bennyworth for the win in the Prime class in this race, as we see Lee Horn meanwhile getting a little bit wrong coming out to turn number 1, brings the car back together in the run towards turn number 3, but Lee Horn feeling that pressure as well. He wants to get the move done, but he's too far back. Meanwhile, in the battle here for P4, I wonder if we're going to see a little bit of a squabble here between the members of the Higgins family. Higgins Jr. here having a run out of turn number 4, pretty slow run, but look at Chris Daines here closing up gradually. He has over the last couple of laps taken 6 to 7 tenths a lap out of these guys, but I don't think he's got enough time here unless there's a major error. And as they make the way through what is turn number 5 and up towards 6 and 7 they go. Holmes right now just trying to hold on for the last couple of corners. But speaking of holding on, it is the case that we do look to our leader here of Dorey as he makes his way into turn number 10. It's looking good so far. Only one more major corner to go here as he exits the tricky turn 10, heading up towards turn number 11. Gavan Garner's there behind him, looks to the inside from very far back, but there won't be a move from this distance. Well, as they make the way through the final corner, we had the question of could he withstand the pressure, and he has, because Jamie Dorey will take the checker flag and make it 2 out of 2 here at Oulton Park in round number 4, ahead of Gavan Garner in P2, and then we'll have Andrew Holmes, who holds on to P3 come the line, ahead of John Higgins Jr. and John Higgins Sr. Chris Daines recovers to P6 and 10 places gained. Ben Bennyworth in P7, taking the win in the Prime class. A brilliant drive from Ben Bennyworth, he's on form today. Lee Horn P8, Paul Scott P9, and then Nigel Stock in P10 will complete the Prime podium of what is Bennyworth, Scott and Stock. We'll then have Matthew Addy P11, Mams P12, David Whitehouse coming home in P13. A tricky one for David Whitehouse, not the way he wanted it to go. It'll then be Tom Delaney P14, and then the last driver to finish on the lead lap. He's a little way away, but he's on his way gradually. Here's Gaz Will right now, the Next Gen Racing green driver. Only 3 corners to go. He comes through turn number 10, but as he rolls his way on through here, still more experience being gained by the novice. And indeed, he may be a novice here, but you've got to admire his credit and also his tenacity to finish each and every race. It doesn't matter how far he is away. When you get to that checker flag, you are a winner in your own right. And as the 37 driver comes out to turn number 11 into 12, congratulations to him for a P15. He comes to the line, and that completes all of our drivers' this race as we now look to those standings, of course subject to any stewards' inquiries. So after our second race, it is the case in round number 4 of the Next Gen Racing Touring Car Championship here at Oulton Park, Ireland today. It was of Jamie Dorey who took the win in race number 2 by just under half a second ahead of Gavan Garner. Garner put the pressure on lap after lap, took a look at a move once or twice, but wasn't able to pull off the move he needed for the win, but still a P2, he'll be pleased with that. Andrew Holmes completes the overall and the pro podium, P3. A great drive there from the privateer, just holding off John Higgins Jr. and John Higgins Sr., who finished P4, P5. HSR are having a field day here at Oulton Park, there's no doubt about it. And then Chris Daines with that recovery drive after that dismal, disastrous race number 1, making his way from the back of the field to P6. Watch out for him in race number 3. He will be coming on full strength. Then we have Ben Bennyworth, our winner in the Prime class, P7, ahead of Lee Horn, and then Paul Scott and Nigel Stock to round off the top 10, and indeed round off the Prime podium. Matthew Addy, the best of the rest, outside the top 10 in P11, beating Matt Emmons, his teammate there, to P11. Emmons P12, David Whitehouse P13, Tom Delaney P14. And Gaz Will, the last driver to finish on the lead lap, P15. We also had there the retirements of Mark Arrowsmith in the early stages of the race after that opening lap whack to the wall at turn number 3, and Mark Sykes for the early retirement as well. Unfortunate for the pair of them. But now, ladies and gentlemen, we get ready for what is race number 3. But before we do, of course, it is time for the live draw of that reverse grid position. And as we do cut to the commentary booth here, it is the case. Here in the United Kingdom, in the Kentish commentary booth, we have our lottery mix here. It is the case, our lottery bowl. And we do have, just for those wondering, we have an equal number of sticky notes here for P6 through to P12. We're going to shuffle them together with our eyes closed and then make the draw. Alrighty, without further ado, we're going to be pulling one out of the bowl. And, well, reverse grid poll for today's race number 3 at Oulton Park, Ireland is... It is going to be P9. 9th place is reverse grid poll, which means it will be Paul Scott who starts on pole position. The number 9 seems to be coming up a lot at the moment, but it is P9 today. So Paul Scott will be on pole, and he'll be joined on that front row by his rival of Lee Horn. It's going to be fireworks in the run to turn 1 for the pair of them. And speaking of fireworks, ladies and gentlemen, there's going to be fireworks over the course of the entirety of race number 3. Do not go too far away. We will be back in approximately 5 minutes' time for the build-up to race number 3. You will not want to miss it. That I can assure you. We'll see you soon. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back then for the build-up to race number 3 on our schedule for tonight. And as you can see there in the centre of your screen, it is the case. We've already completed qualifying. We've already completed sprint race number 1. Sprint race number 2 is by the by, and now it is time for us to go racing one last time for 20 minutes of racing action here in round number 4 of the NXTCC for 2022 at the Oulton Park Island Circuit. And well, what have we seen so far? We have seen a double win for Jamie Dorey in the Pro class. We have seen a brilliant batting up and down the field, whether it is for the win or alternatively in the midfield, particularly inside the top 10. And now with a top 9 reverse grid, thanks to our draw picking what was at position number 9, it is the case that we are going to be seeing Paul Scott starting on pole, joined on that front row by Lee Horn, but on the second row, the one driver to watch out for will be Chris Daines, who'll be starting in P4 on the grid, and after a difficult race number 1, a recovery drive in race number 2, he'll now be looking to go for broke, no doubt about that. But of course, with Gavan and Jamie Dorey starting P8 and P9 respectively, you can imagine they will both as well be looking to make the way up through the order and go hunting in short order as well, as we look to what is Chris Daines here, making his way down towards a turn at number 11, and as he does, it is the case that the Danishman from Varano Motorsport right now gets himself all set up. Indeed, all of our drivers are, with just 3 minutes left. Now, the key takeaways we've seen over the course of the 2 races so far is that overtaking is definitely possible here at the Oulton Park circuit. If you're close enough to be able to affect the pass, get yourself down on the inside or try and go around the outside. However, it is also the case that defending is highly possible, and we have seen a number of drivers put up brilliant defences time and time again. So put 2 and 2 together, what it effectively means is for drivers to be able to go well and make overtakes, they've got to essentially dig deep and really deliver on those moves. But at the same time, if they're not brave enough drivers, then they may find themselves being stuck behind a rival for an extended period of time. And that's what we've seen a number of drivers experience here to date, in the fact that it is the case that they haven't been able close enough to affect a pass or get the nose in for a pass, then it has not worked out. Now we see here Mark Harrismith making his way down towards turn number 3, and he's heading down in, and now I believe he has changed to the Honda Civic here. I don't know if he's picked the Honda Civic by mistake, but it is the case, make no mistake, that is a throwback, I do believe, to one of the classic British Touring Car Championship Honda Civic liveries, albeit not being on what is the FK8 machine, but instead being on what is the effective, unless I'm very much mistaken, the FK2 touring car machine. And as Harrismith makes his way up towards what is turn number 5 here, it is the case, heading all the way down, bringing out the old Halfords livery. You do love to see it. But as he rolls his way through in the number 46 car here, it'll be the case, that change of car, could it benefit him? Well, I don't think it would benefit him in terms of in the steward's room. There might be a few words afterwards in terms of the car switch after the turn up in the Elantra for the first 2 races, but still, that has to be done after the race, not right now. And we look forward to seeing what he can do in the Honda Civic Type R regardless. But one driver's had a difficult day so far, Matt Evans for NXTGEN Racing Green. It'll be the case that our number 72 driver, after coming into contact with his teammate in race number 1, if I remember correctly, and being battling with his teammate in race number 2, that being Matthew Addy, it is the case now he'll be looking to try and get in that top 10 in race number 3. As he heads through turn number 1 this time, only a minute left on the clock, and all eyes will of course be on the driver behind him, Jamie Dorey. We can imagine Dorey's going to try and have a fast start. He'll try and go for the scramble into the first couple of corners, given the fact he'll be starting in that midfield, and he won't be starting on the rise or the incline where the start-finish grid line is. It is the case he'll be starting a bit of flatter ground, which may give him the run in towards turn number 1, much like what we saw from Andrew Holmes on race number 1, where he had that absolutely blistering start at the inside of a number of drivers into turn number 1. But as they make their way on around here, less than 30 seconds now left on the clock. And, well, Tom Delaney, the SVPMR with Ignium driver, having been in the wars for most of the races tonight, has not worked out for him. A difficult race 1, a follow-up difficult race number 2. Can he have a little bit of peace and joy in race number 3? That will be the thing for him, of course, as he makes his way into turn number 10 here. It's just not worked out here today at Oulton Park in the British countryside. But with all of the time now complete in this warm-up period, although drivers have entered, it is now the case that we get ready to go to the grid. And as we do get that transition to the grid, let's take you through it for one last time tonight. Starting on pole then with reverse grid pole is Paul Scott, the Pro-Am driver for NXTGEN Racing Blue. Joined on the front rows, NXTGEN Racing Green's Lee Horn, and behind them on row number 2, we have Ben Bennyworth from Prime Stacking with Solo Racing and Varano Motorsport's Chris Daines. Watch out for them, they'll both be looking to go fast in their respective classes. John Higgins Senior starts P5, joined by his teammate John Higgins Jr. The HSR drivers line up side by side, and then we'll have Andrew Holmes and Gavan Gardner on what is that fourth row. Behind them, we then have Jamie Dorey and Nigel Stock starting in P9, P10 respectively, with Matthew Addy kicking off our 6th row in P11, joined by Matt Emmons in P12, and then behind them on row number 7, David Whitehouse and Tom Delaney, the 2 Pro-Am drivers, and then we do have Gazwill and Mark Harris-Smith on our final full row, and then last but not least, starting P17, it is Mark Sykes on his lonesome on that 9th row. But as we do now look to the drivers here, we clear the lights, and it is the case, we wait for the reds.
Green flag, green flag.
It's lights out and away we go then one last time here at Oulton Park, and Paul Scott looks to get a good start here as they make their way down towards turn number 1, but as they do, Ben Bennyworth gets a better start compared to the top 2 and puts himself between Paul Scott and Lee Horn, but he's not quite able to make it work. He runs a bit wide and Paul Scott drops behind what is there, Chris Daines, as they make their way down the hill into turn number 3. Chris Daines around the outside already of Ben Bennyworth. Ben Bennyworth getting that blistering start, but then blundering it out of 1, meaning he's now dropped back and it causes the field to come together. We see running off there, that was Matt Emmons, David Whitehouse having a brief off as well, but brings it back on circuit. They're all going racing now down into the hairpin, and as they all make it under brakes, we've got a lock up there from Higgins Senior. Higgins Jr. up the inside now of as far as they make their way out to turn number 4 and up towards 5. Oh, good, it's been Andrew Holmes. It's turned there on the back straight. Now, what exactly's happened there, we're not sure. We'll find out very shortly, but Andrew Holmes being turned across the circuit, and as they all make their way down into the chicane, oh, it's all kicking off here, as we've got Mark Harris and David Whitehouse both involved in contact. They've come together by the looks of things, and well, with them both coming together, all the field have made the way on through. Now, will we see a safety car potentially? That is the big question here. I don't think so, because everyone's been able to carry on going racing. And speaking of going racing, we can see that Higgins Jr. up the inside of Paul Scott for P3 as they roll the way through turn number 10, and as they do, going wide and almost into the wall there, that is Paul Scott, I believe, who returns to the circuit and in the mad scramble keeps it together. Now, how Paul Scott has avoided and threaded the needle there, somebody will have to tell me in the back of a postcard, but it is the case that, my goodness, Paul Scott there with a near miss and a half. He's kept it together, but he's lost a lot of places. Jamie Dorey here battles with Wes Higgins Senior down into turn number 1 as they make the way under braking this time. Well, Paul Scott's coming back. Paul Scott is not giving up here, and the tenacity of Paul Scott, despite it all, he's completely unfazed. But in the process, I think Gavan Gardner is now going to come through into that P7 position now. Paul Scott leaving the door well open, and indeed it is a safety car, ladies and gentlemen, as they make their way down through at turn number 3. They were just called the safety car as they made their way on through. But my goodness, a lot to dissect in those opening couple of laps, and let's take a look back at exactly what happened as we do first off start off with what happened to Andrew Holmes. Well, this was coming out of turn number 4 then, and on that grass tried to thread the needle, and well, I think there's a bit of contact there with one of our drivers. We take another look back at that contact. I think that was contact with what was Gavan Gardner there as they came out. Yes, it was, but Holmes was already slightly gone there. I think there was a little bit of a tap from the driver behind him, and then he came across the path of Gavan Gardner, and well, there's only one way that went. Meanwhile, in the battle between Whitehouse and what was there, I do believe, Mark Harris-Smith, we'll take another look back at that very shortly, but I think Mark Harris-Smith getting it pretty wrong into the corner. In fact, we look from Mark Harris-Smith's perspective here as they made their way down into the chicane, and under braking now, I think he puts a wheel to the grass, and that upsets the car and clips David Whitehouse, and in return, as everyone comes through the corner, it's a whack, a biff and a bash, and it is the case there. Multiple drivers caught up in it, including Matt Emmons, including Gazwill and Thomas Delaney, but in the end, most of our drivers have made it on through. As we return to the live pictures here, it is the case we do hear that the safety car is still out currently. Will it be coming in at the end of this lap? Those are the 2 major instances that we have seen so far. No, safety car stays on out. And I do believe that Matt Emmons was also involved in a bit of a shunt just before the safety car arrived on circuit. We take a look at what happened to Matt Emmons. In fact, I think this was in the run down towards the corners. We right on board here, Adams. Now he's got Gazwell on his left, but he's past Gazwell already. So he comes into this incident, and then it's the case the rear steps out with the brake bias being towards the rear and slightly cold tyres. And in the end, he makes the contact with Aerosmith there. And I think Edmonds would argue there was nothing he could have done. But as we look back to live pictures here, indeed it is the case that we have had the retirement of Mark Aerosmith. Well, no, in fact, my apologies, not the retirement. He's jumped back to the pits. We thought he might retire due to damage to the car, but they were been able to repair the car. And Aerosmith, who is now a lap down effectively, he will join the back of this pack. I think he may be released on through if they can let him on through. And we've got Andrew Holmes right now running on around after that whack, coming out to turn number 4 to the barrier on the inside in the run down towards 5. And well, for Andrew Holmes right now, he's trying to catch back up to the leaders, but he has not got long left. I suspect the safety car will be in at the end of this lap and we'll be going racing once again. But it's the first time we've seen the safety car all race evening. And to be fair, given how tight Oulton Park is, that's testament to the calibre of the racing we have seen. In fact, we're only seeing the safety car deployed right at the end of the day here in race number 3 of round number 4. And Holmes right now making his way across the timeline. I think if the safety car comes in at the end of this lap, he will not catch up to this field. He will be on the lead lap, but he's going to be a very long way from the pack as they make the way through turn number 10. Now we'll wait to see what the safety car does here. Of course, the safety car being driven by Gaz Williams, the residential and next-gen racing safety car driver in the Porsche Cayman GT4 718. And as he rolls his way through the right hand there, I think we are going to see our safety car stay out one more lap. Yes, it is to let Holmes close up to the field, but I suspect that after this lap, it will be the case the safety car will be coming on in, and then we will go racing once again with approximately what should be about 12 to 13 minutes of racing still left on the cards, all things considered. But where is Andrew Holmes right now? Well, he is making his way through turns 5 and 6. He's still a way to go, but he should be able to close up as he makes his way out of 7 here. He's going to have to go some, to be fair, to be able to close up within the speed limits imposed. But as he makes his way up through towards turn number 10 here, it is the case that Holmes, if he can catch up to that field, it'll be great to see him try and fight his way on through. But speaking of fights here, of course, Lee Horn finds himself in that lead position after that brilliant start. And to be fair, what could have been for this man as we ride on board with him, Ben Bennyworth, we're trying to park the seas and do the Moses manoeuvre into turn 1. He almost delivered what would have been perhaps one of the overtakes of the season into turn 1 to come from the second row, split the leaders and go through the middle of them to take the lead. He managed to get the jump on Paul Scott, but in the end Lee Horn was savvy to it, defended to the inside. Bennyworth went wide with the cold tyres, the bit of understeer in the car, and in the end found himself compromised in the run down towards turn number 3, enabling Chris Daines and eventually John Higgins Jr. to come on through. But to be fair, Bennyworth was our winner, of course, in the Pro-Am class in race number 2. He is right now leading the Pro-Am class in this race number 3, and he is ahead of second place driver in the class, Paul Scott, who's down in P8. And well, Paul Scott has been in the wars already. Bennyworth has made some wars occur, but you can imagine he will now be looking to hunker down and get ready to go racing once again, as we do see here Lee Horn shaking the car from left to right. He's letting the safety car go. The safety car is coming in this lap, and it'll be to Lee Horn to take us to the restart. As they make the way out the final corner, Lee Horn has gone early as they charge the timeline, and well, he has not timed this to perfection. Chris Daines is right there with them as they resume the racing here with what is 13 minutes to go plus the final lap, and Lee Horn, cold tyres, goes in. Chris Daines just avoids him. Jamie Dorey follows through in the background. They're running a bit deep as they make their way down towards turn number 3, and Chris Daines is into the lead of this race. But as they roll the way down the hill, Gavan Garner will know he's needing to put the pressure onto Jamie Dorey right now, because Dorey looks very uncomfortable at this point on the restart. Gardner, by comparison, looks quite happy with the car. Oh, goodness me, I say that. Puts a wheel on the grass down to break it into the hairpin, and the car goes round. A bit of a tap to Dorey's side on the left-hand side, but Gavin Gardner down to P12. That's not the way we wanted it to be, and indeed it's gone wrong for him, as meanwhile all of the field come charging down line astern into the chicane, and it is the case that they make their way through turns 5, 6 and 7. No change right now. Although I say that, oh goodness me, what on earth is happening to Lee Horn? He's off track and he rejoined, but was it the case there was contact, as we're hearing that Mark Sykes has jumped to the pits with an issue to the car? Well, Lee Horn here returns to the circuit, and as he does, we'll very shortly take a look back at what exactly happened to Lee Horn. But as they roll their way through turn number 10 right now, Lee Horn definitely in an uncustomary error, if it was an error of his own doing, unless there was some contact in the mix. But we are about to find out exactly what happened to Lee Horn, and here we go. Well, this was only moments ago, coming through the chicane, and indeed it was a mistake of his own doing. Puts the wheel onto the grass there, swinging the car way too much, coming out of 6 to the left-hand side for turn number 7. Catches the car, however, very nicely. We must return to our live pictures here, because it is the case that John Higgins Sr. under pressure from Jamie Dorey in the run through 2 and into 3. But Higgins Sr. here defends the inside. There's a bit of contact between the two of them, and you can see Jamie Dorey trying to... Oh my good lord! It's the case that two of them have come together, and Jamie Dorey with a massive whack to the wall there on the exit of turn number 3. Well, that is going to be a jump to the pits, there's no doubt about that. And Higgins Sr. with wounds as well. Can he get it around? Jamie Dorey has jumped into the pit lane from what we understand. But as they make the way on round right now, it is the case that it has all gone wrong for Jamie Dorey and Higgins Sr. And we'll take a look back very shortly at how that occurred. But indeed, both drivers have lost out massively in their respective battles and positions, as meanwhile we look a bit further up the field. And here is Chris Daines, your leader right now, is trying to break away from Higgins Jr. As they make the way through turn number 10 here, I can tell you that it's the case that Dorey's actually rejoined the circuit and is trying to make it to the end of this lap rather than lose a lap on the field, as we're hearing that Mark Sykes is leaving the pit lane potentially soon as well with the repair work they're doing to his car. But my goodness, it has been a lot of drama, and well, with 10 minutes complete and 10 still to go here, we may not have that much race. Indeed, the safety car is out once again, so we do have the safety car down on the exit of turn number 1. And here is the safety car going slowly to pick up the field. It's letting Mark Sykes go, of course. Mark Sykes is a lap down and being released here. But right now, as they all come down the hill into turn number 3, it gives us an opportunity to catch our breath and find out exactly what happened between Jamie Dorey and John Higgins Sr. in what was a brilliant battle, and then it all went wrong. As they made the way out the corner, this is John Higgins Sr. and well, he was turned by the looks of things, and that seems to have been what kicked it all off. So we take a little bit of a look further back between the two of them here, and well, we take a look back at how the battle kicked off from now what is Jamie Dorey's perspective. And as he made his way down, he's got what is Higgins Sr. on his inside, and coming out of the corner here. Oh, now that's a very difficult one to be able to judge. It's a case that both of them coming together would argue that they're placed on circuit. But now we take a look back from the exterior cameras, and as they made their way through the corner, it looks like there's a bit of netcode contact in there, in fact, because the two cars came together and started to turn on one another before they actually physically come together on our screen. So that might be a little bit of netcode, plus also contact between the two drivers. But in the end, Dorey being sent to the wall, and well, in the end, reversing back onto circuit, but doing so only after the field was clear, and the Next Gen Racing orange driver definitely losing out more than what was Higgins Sr. A difficult moment for the pair of them, but as we return to the live pictures now, I think both drivers racing to the ragged edge. It was brilliant battling between the two of them, but then unfortunately a bit of contact inspired by some netcode, I think just saw those two major protagonists in the Pro Class Championship have their races upturned, and not in the best possible way, in the worst possible way, particularly for Jamie Dorey. But now, as the time continues to wear on down here, the safety car will go around for another lap, because we do have drivers out there who are being given the opportunity to catch up for another lap. I suspect they will only have this extra lap, and then we will be going racing once again. But indeed, it is cutting the momentum of the racing here. And well, Chris Daines had a brilliant restart last time around. Can he make it another solid restart after Lee Horn lost out, and Lee Horn down to P6 after that mistake at what was the chicane, particularly just taking a little bit too much of a run onto the grass out of turn 6 for turn into turn 7. And can he find his composure now and settle down and go hunting after Matthew Addy, who, to be fair, in all of this, Matthew Addy has gained 6 places, and at the same time is now running in P5, and that's the effective P3 on the podium in the Pro Class. He's had a difficult race 1 and race 2, but he's having a much better race number 3, albeit he has not got long to race here, given the fact by the time the safety car comes around, and should it release our field at the end of this lap, We'll only have about 6 minutes plus the final lap of racing to go, so not too much. It'll become much more of a sprint race now. Albeit it is a sprint, we haven't got any pit stops, but it really will be the case. That is a very short sprint by comparison to what our drivers may have been expecting. But that is the way it goes, of course, here at Oulton Park. You can have major incidents, and we've seen a couple now in what is this race number 3. But we saved, what we normally say is we saved the best till last. I'd say we saved the best of the instants to last in terms of their scale. But of course, nobody wants to see a car whack into the wall, or indeed falling apart, or indeed drivers coming together and knocking each other out of the race or down the field, because at the end of the day, it takes away from the spectacle. But of course, at Next Gen Racing, nobody does mean to cause that. It happens. That is what close, fierce and firm racing is all about. And well, now we look to Chris Daines here. The safety car has pulled off to a distance, and Chris Daines is waiting to conduct the restart. And he's really bunching the field up here. You can see John Higgins Jr. getting ready, and well, I think Daines has got. He's gone just before the run into turn number 11. He's gone in a bit of an uncharacteristic place, to be fair, but it's worked out really nicely for the Danishman, for as he makes his way across the timeline, he's opened up that gap to just over 4/10 of a second. That's a nice restart from Daines, and what it means now is John Higgins Jr. has really got to push. And speaking of pushing here, we can see Lee Horn immediately trying to go on the offensive versus what is Matthew Addy in front. Nigel Stock just behind, of course, as well. A major opportunity here in race number 3 to make up some lost ground in the first 2 races as they make their way down the hill. David Whitehouse here running P10. Can he hold on to a top 10 finish here today after missing out in race 1 and only took up race number 2? Higgins Senior, meanwhile, looking to try and go round the outside here in the run to turn number 4. If he's going to do it, he's going to be bold on the brakes, but Whitehouse will shut the door on him very comfortably there as they make their way out the corner, and Higgins Senior can't come through. Meanwhile, Andrew Holmes finds his way past Gaswell in the run to turn number 4. As they make their way out the corner, Jamie Dorey also trying to go round the outside now in the run down the back straight as they head up towards turn number 5. Whitehouse here, he is passed around the outside by Higgins Jr. Meanwhile, we can see everyone else has calmed down behind as Whitehouse loses that P10 to Higgins Senior, I should say, not Higgins Jr., my apologies. And as they roll the way out here, we can see Delaney and Will side by side. Will on that inside there, and Will goes around the outside for P14. Sorry, Delaney goes around the outside for P14 and Will. As meanwhile, Will there drops onto the grass very slight, I think just a little bit disrupted in his rhythm, heading up towards turn number 10. But meanwhile, we look here to Gavan Garner, who's going up the inside for P8 versus what is Matt Emmons here, trying to get a couple more places. And as he rolls his way through at turn number 11, gets the move done for P8. His next target, Nigel Stock for P7, as they head to the timeline. As they come charging across that line at the moment with a limited number of laps left on the clock, it is the case that every driver's now really got to go for it. And even if the car's got cold tyres and cold brakes, they've just got to try and fathom where the grip is in the car and how far they can push it. They can't afford to be cautious now because there's no time for caution as they roll the way through turn number 3. And as they do here, Emmons falling back gradually from Gardner on the exit of the corner. Meanwhile, Paul Scott here, of course, who started on pole, now in P4. We ride on board here with the Audi RS3 driver, and as he makes his way out to the corner and charges up towards turn number 5, it is the case that Paul Scott looking to try and deliver in the long run, albeit it's the case that Bennyworth's in front of him, his rival for the lead of what is this class in this final race. Bennyworth being our pro-am leader. You can see there in the left-hand wing mirror of what is the car of Paul Scott, how it is the case we have Matthew Addy and Lee Horn right behind him as they go through certain corners. Paul Scott is right now under pressure here. As we look from the gearbox, there is Matthew Addy, who's got Lee Horn and Nigel Stock not too far behind as they roll away through turn number 10. And Paul Scott at this point has got to play a balancing act of keeping the pros behind but chasing after his rival in the pro-am class here, because Bennyworth right now is on a charge as we briefly lose a little bit of connectivity there to Paul Scott's car, and we'll hope that's not a sign of a potential engine blowout or a disconnection, as it's known in the technical world of IT, as they make their way up towards turn number 1. And oh goodness me, what on earth has happened to Nigel Stock? Oh, it looks like there's been contact, and that is Matt Evans there involved in some sort of contact with Stock. Well, we presume so, but with that releases David Whitehouse here into P9, all things said and done, as he rolls his way down towards turn number 3. And as he does, well, will that be another safety car? Because that is going to be a safety car that is going to take us to the end of the race. And well, it'll be the case nobody wants to finish under a safety car, but right now David Whitehouse defending versus Holmes here for the final spot in the, well, not the final spot, the second to last spot in the top 10. As we did an update to our timing tower, And as they make the way out of the corner, Andrew Holmes gets the cutback run here on Whitehouse out to turn number 4. Holmes up the inside. I think Whitehouse at this point has got to look for a potential cutback into the chicane if Holmes misses his braking point, but he doesn't. Holmes takes that P9 up the inside into turn 5. But to be fair, Whitehouse right now just needs to hold on for 2 more laps. He could potentially bring home a top 10 here at Oulton Park today as they roll their way on through. And we briefly take a look back at what happened to Nigel Stock. Was on the grass there coming out of turn number 11, and as he returned to the circuit, the car gave way into the path of what was Matt Emmons there. Both drivers having a difficult day, and well, it has to be said, whether there was a bit of a push that sent Nigel Stock off in the first place, we take a look back a little bit further here, whether there was any contact, whether it was his own doing. And well, I think it's the case. In the end, it was his own doing. And in terms of Emmons here, we'll ride on board, and you'll see Emmons has to try and dodge. And in the end, he was hoping that Stock's car was going to go one way. It didn't. It snapped the other way. And Emmons, in the end, falls victim to the wayward Crest Autosport with Pebbles machine. But still, nothing can be done about that. And I think they'll settle their differences in a polite conversation in the pit lane. To be fair, I don't think Emmons will have a go about that. That's the way racing goes sometimes, and he just could not pick the right way to go, whether it was left or right. But return to live pictures here. We've only got now a minute left as we see there flash of lights and Jamie Dorey trying to get into the head of David Whitehouse, but Whitehouse is not going to let him in. It is the final lap, and as they make the way on around here, it's one of those cases whereby all the field right now trying to jostle for those final positions, but we've been deprived a lot of the racing due to the incidents in the safety cars, so it may be the case we don't see too many more moves here, although Matthew Addy seems to have had a poor run out of turn number 7 as he runs his way up the hill. Lee Horn's going to try and look around the outside to inside, puts the wheel into the grass briefly right on the threshold, and as they make the way into turn number 10, Lee Horn up the inside here for P5 as they roll the way through the corner. But meanwhile, as they roll the way through, we can see that Jamie Dorey trying to go around the outside of the Whitehouse, but we must cut away for as he makes his way out of the final corner. He heads to the timeline, and well, he's going to take the win. Chris Daines wins race number 3 for Varano Motorsport ahead of John Higgins Jr., and then it will be Ben Bennyworth who completes our overall podium and takes the win in the Pro-Am class ahead of Paul Scott, Gavan Garner P5, then Lee Horn P6. In the end, just about holding off Matthew Addy, but losing out to Gavan Gardner, and Matthew Addy P7, followed by John Higgins Senior P8. Andrew Holmes P9, and then I can confirm that David Whitehouse picks up a P10 there, and he is on the podium of the Pro-Ams, P3 in the Pro-Am class ahead of Jamie Dorey, and it's Tom Delaney P12, Mark Harris-Smith P13 as he makes his way around here to wrap up. And then we do have Gaswell P14, Mark Sykes P15, and Nigel Stock P16 in a race. Well, I think you can tell the frustration there. It's the case it has not gone his way, but let's take a look at those race results for race number 3. So after our final 20 minutes of racing here today at the Oulton Park Island Circuit in round number 4 of the NXTGEN Racing Touring Car Championship for 2022, it is the case that Chris Daines taking the win in the end by what was 2 seconds almost over John Higgins Jr. in P2. Ben Bennyworth there taking the Pro-Am win and also completing our overall podium. Congratulations to Bennyworth on what has been a superb day for him, just pipping Paul Scott to that second win, and indeed taking that P4. Paul Scott just missing out on the overall podium. Gavan Garner P5 there, completing the top 5 ahead of Lee Horn, Matthew Addy, John Higgins, John Higgins Senior there, and Andrew Holmes and David Whitehouse completing the top 10, and Whitehouse holding on to take his first top 10 here today. Indeed, a great result for Whitehouse. And then we have Jamie Dorey P11 ahead of Tom Delaney, Mark Harris-Smith, Gaswell, and Mark Sykes completing our top 15. And then Matt Emmons and Nigel Stock, of course, both in that contact earlier on, where it is the case that Matt Emmons is classified as finishing ahead of Nigel Stock, even though our timing data says otherwise, but that will be confirmed post-round by our organisers and stewards. But what a very different race in race number 3 compared to our first 2 races, interrupted by multiple safety cars. We only really had in the end about 8 minutes of overall effective racing, but still the racing we did have, it was close, and indeed it goes to demonstrate that touring car is absolutely loved by the Oulton Park circuit. And well, now it is the case that we do need to find out the faults from our drivers in the post-round interviews. We'll be bringing those to you in about 5 minutes' time. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back soon to hear the faults of our selected drivers. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we're due to conduct our post-round interviews, and we're going to be starting off, instead of our first selected driver of Jamie Dorey tonight. Unfortunately, he's not quite available at the moment, but we'll hope to catch him later on this evening. It will be the case. We'll be starting off with our second interviewee, and that will, of course, be John Higgins Sr., who, well, after a difficult day at Mosport, it'll be interesting to hear his thoughts now in terms of how things have gone today at Oulton Park. Well, as he joins me in the interview room, John, we talked about last time, of course, at Mosport, things did not work out for yourself and HSR. The Elantra just did not have the pace in those hot temperatures, but you said Oulton Park was going to be different, and well, a third place, a fifth place, and a P8, I think, show it. How's your night been at Oulton Park?
It's been really good, Paul. To say we didn't have the pace at Mosport, we had third overall in the final race, so the Elantra comes alive on colder temps. We were hoping for slightly less temp at Oulton. It was still pretty hot. The Elantra comes alive sort of below 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And the first two races, I think it was 99, then 101. So, really good races. Didn't hassle too much in the second race. And I've obviously got Junior in front of me, and you can see Chris Daines closing towards the end. And it was like, what do I do here? Because I think we could have had a run at June's, but then, I'm just looking to gather points and have as good night as possible. And then, we've just been debating it in the chat room. I'm not particularly happy with Jamie. I'm not going to fall out about him. With him about it, but it's just one of them. We've watched a replay. He thinks I could have done this. I think he could have run a little bit wide. He's turned me, and look, it is what it is. So, I've tried that move in real life in a legend car, and it doesn't work. And when he got the run out of turn one on me, and it was like, okay, I know where to position my car. Let him have the inside, and let him have the outside for the right hand, and knowing that that's going to be really difficult. And I know he's pulled it on somebody else tonight, and that's sort of his defense. And but he's not racing me. And I've raced my whole life, and I know where to position my car. And people are chipping in saying you should have gave him a bit more room. I can't give him any more room. I'm on the inside, turning left. The corner's mine. I've accelerated, and we've unfortunately tangled, and that's cost me, I think, a pretty decent position, because the track temperature's down at 69 degrees Fahrenheit. Junior's finished second. It shows how strong the Elantra was. But listen, we'll move on to, I think it's Zandvoort next week, and it's a good bag of points. Like you say, a third, a fifth, and a eighth, I think that was. So it's a good bag of points, and we'll just take it on the chin, and we'll discuss it some more, no doubt.
Oh, indeed. And focusing on the positives from today after that difficulty in race number 3, of course. In race number 1, we saw a lot of pace from yourself in particular, really battling towards the front of the field. Albeit we did see that Chris Daines had that early retirement, so it opened up a bit more opportunities in the field. But it seemed as though Dorey and also Gardner were a little bit further ahead in terms of the pace compared to yourself. Was race number 1 more of a focus of, okay, I'm not going to catch them, but I can put myself on the podium here?
It's just trying not to burn the tyres off. As I said earlier on, the track temp, I think, was 99 in the first race, so we knew it was going to be a little bit of struggle, and you're going to have to look after your tyres. And to be fair, Jamie and I think it was Chris in second place didn't scamper away the first half of the race, and I was just pacing myself. I was looking in the mirror. Junior was obviously behind me. He was struggling big time, and I think you could tell by the queue of cars that were behind him that they were going to have to work really hard to get by him. And I think it was just a mistake. I think 2 laps from the end where Junior went a little bit wide, and I think he had a bit of a collision with Lee and stuff. But by that time, I'd backed off it, take the third place. I'm not sure if I'm still in Pro-Am, Pro or whatever. If I'm still in Pro-Am, then that was obviously the win. So it was just about looking after the car, looking after the tyres, don't make any mistakes, because that chicane tyres, as you saw, in fact, it was Gavan that was in front of me, because obviously Chris made the mistake on the first lap and just clipped them. And it's so easy to do. You think you're so close, and then when you watch your replays from practice, you're actually miles away from it. So then you think, oh, I can take a bit more, and I can take a bit more. and then you ended up clipping it, and yeah, it's a bust tire or the wheels off or whatever. So yeah, it was just about consolidating third place and trying to do as well in the second race. Obviously, starting from third, it didn't happen. You know, we ended up fifth, and that's fine. But yeah, another solid night. It could have been much better, but listen, that's motorsport. I've been about it my whole life, so I know how it can change in a heartbeat. So.
Oh, most definitely. And just a little bit of a word, of course, running alongside Junior over the course of races 1 and 2 in particular, seeing you both running in formation in the HSR colours, it must give you a little bit of family pride.
Oh, I'm proud as punch of him. You know, we want to take it real life, and for the last 18 months, I've been hassling him about going to do his arts license because we can't do anything until he does that. But he continues to sit in his hands and doesn't do anything about it. So I've sort of given up. And you know, when he's ready, he's ready. And you know, but to watch him on this, and he gets really down heart sometimes, and you have to give him a bit of a spur on. You know, in that first race, you know, I'm pulling away from him, and you know, he's moaning about the car, and it's just, dude, just focus and just keep it going, and just hit your marks and get your lap time in. And you know, Oulton Park's notoriously difficult to pass, and if you position your car right, it is so difficult to get by somebody, unless they're going to make a crazy lunge and sort of half take you out. So you know, he made a slight mistake in the hairpin. But listen, I've watched him now for what's that, the best part of 2 years. He makes me immensely proud. Not just from the sim racing, but he's my boy. And yeah, was I going to take it? You know, I could have passed him a couple of times in that second race when I've sat behind him, but you just sit there and just protect his position, because obviously I saw Chris coming, and one, he's got to get by me to get to Junior. So I'd have made that very difficult to make sure that Junior had that fourth place.
Oh, indeed. No, that's very touching. It's wonderful to hear that pride shining on through from yourself to your son. And looking ahead to next week, of course, we head to our equivalent, our Dutch equivalent of Croft, which is the Zandvoort Grand Prix circuit. How are you feeling going to that circuit? And just to confirm, you are racing in the pro class as of this week onwards.
Oh dear. For Zandvoort, have absolutely no idea. I've downloaded it. I haven't driven a single lap on the thing yet. So we'll get hard at it, and over the weekend, it's obviously bank holiday. Probably spend a great deal of time on Monday, because I'm away on business Tuesday, Wednesday, and then back sort of Thursday afternoon, just in time for next week's race. So I'm not going to have too much practice, but the plan is to try and get June's on, and we'll have a proper run round and see where we are. I'm not too sure. I haven't seen the layout of the track. You know, the Hyundai it suits like Oulton. The only place it struggles at Oulton is through the chicane and then the right-hander at Knickerbrook, where it has to change direction pretty quickly, but that's down to the long wheelbase. So I don't even know what the layout for Zandvoort is. If it's a twisty track, then we're probably going to struggle. If it's a bit like Oulton, then fine. So we'll see. We'll see. We're doing well. That's all that matters. So we keep bagging them points. So I'm not sure about the pro thing, as I spoke about last week. But listen, I said I'll take it as a compliment.
Oh, indeed. Well, you're definitely continuing to fly, John. But as always, thank you for joining us in the interview room. And just before we do let you go, is there anyone you'd like to give a shout out to or say thank you to on the broadcast?
Well, I gave a shout out to my dad last week, who actually missed the interview and then watched it the day after. And my mum doesn't really watch it. So, Mum, if you are watching this, or you're going to watch the interview the day after, I love you, and we will see you on Tuesday. So, I love you, Mum. Take it easy.
Oh, that's very sweet. And with that, John, congratulations on your results today. Hope you have a great bank holiday weekend, and we look forward to seeing you take on the tarmac in the Netherlands in a week's time.
Let's have it. Thanks, buddy.
All the best.
Cheers.
So hearing that from John Higgins Sr., and you can understand from his perspective a degree of frustration in regards to what happened between himself and Jamie Dorey in race number 3, but also focusing on the positives there, particularly races 1 and 2, and how things came together and really delivering, despite a slightly higher track temperature than the optimum for the Elantra, but then again, putting together a P3 in race 1, a P5 in race number 2, and of course, being behind his son there in race number 2, and behind that rear guard versus Chris Daines. A lot of family pride in the HSR team, and indeed, the only path continues to be up for them as they head to Zandvoort in a week's time. We look forward to seeing how they get on there, particularly now both of them are, of course, in the pro class. But as we come from our first interview, back to our driver who should have been our first interview, but he wasn't available, it is time for us to interview Jamie Dorey and hear his thoughts on what has been a relatively successful night. So as he joins me in the interview room, Jamie, a positive night on the whole, 2 wins back-to-back, and a bit of difficulty in race number 3, but on reflection, a lot of points to be taken away today.
Yeah, certainly. It's, trying to bag as many points as possible. Yeah, 2 wins, can't squabble about that, especially with the Audi. That car's rapid. Race 3, well, it's a reverse grid, isn't it? It's one of those. Oh, yeah, it's one of those.
Oh, indeed. And just dissecting your evening down, of course, in qualifying, it was the case. A bit of a difficult qualifying session in. We saw a lockout by the Audi on the front row, the 2 Varano Motorsport drivers. Did that change your approach to the race going into race number 1 in particular? Because Varano Motorsport looked very strong, and then Chris Daines clipped the tyres at the chicane.
Yeah, so Corley was the best. I don't think I got a complete lap. I had the pace to be there or thereabouts. My last lap was going to set me for P3. But yeah, it wasn't the best. Obviously, I knew I had to get past the Paul Scott and Nigel Stock quite quickly to be able to try and challenge the Varano cars. Unfortunately for Chris, he hit the inside tyres there. It's very hard to judge in these cars. It's a blessing, as well as I feel sorry for Chris. And it was just a case of trying to make the most while the Audi builds temperature up to the tyres and then just defend for the rest of the race, really.
Indeed, and we did see, with the fact you were pushing on hard, you made the move on Gavan Gardner quite early on in race number 1 and then had to defend for the remainder of the race. Did you notice as the time was going on, sort of, okay, the Audi's now up to temperature, now it's the case its pace is going to shine? Was it one of those sort of, you knew when the time was going to come and you had to go on that defensive posture?
Oh, yeah, 100%. This track is very good because all the cars are strong in certain sectors. So it was a case of showing him where I was definitely stronger, but where he was stronger, trying to make his life a bit of a misery, really, and just saying, if you're going to attempt it, you're going to have to go the long way. So it was always in the back of my mind. Obviously, Gavan is a phenomenal racer. I know I can race really close and clean with him, and some of the moves he pulled it had me worried. But yeah, like I said, utmost respect with Gavan, and yeah, great racing.
Oh, indeed. And that great racing continued into race number 2. Of course, you started on pole with Gavan Gardner alongside you on the front row. Just to comment on the fact that we did see Gardner try to be a bit more aggressive in race number 2, but again, you held him at bay.
Yeah, well, similar scenario, really. It was obviously taken on from race 1, the same thing as race 2. Obviously, Martin Brinkworth as well, who doesn't race in this, promised me an ice cream at Thruxton this weekend if I won race 2, so that was in the back of the mind. So yeah, it was ice cream or nothing, really.
Oh, a definite motivator, the ice cream, especially given the hot weather we're having in the UK at the moment. But then coming away, of course, from the 2 wins to the unfortunate race number 3. Looked as though it was going well to begin with, and then a bit of contact with Higgins Senior. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, obviously trying to push through quite early on at the start, try and get as close to the front as possible. Obviously, my main eye was on Chris with his general pace, and I didn't want him to get too far ahead. The Elantra it struggled probably out of the most of the cars around here. I went for a very opportunistic move around the outside. It's one of those. I pushed him quite tight on the inside curb. There's a little bit of contact. From my point of view, he differs. When I was still on the outside, I didn't have enough room to rejoin the track. I would have hit the grass. So I had to make my way across slowly. Unfortunately, there wasn't a car's width there. And yeah, we had that contact. And then it was just a case of trying to make up as much as I can. And a shout out to Dave Whitehouse on the last lap, who done a mega drive for the last sector, and wicked defending, really, just to pit me.
Oh, indeed. It was unfortunate. He did have that great battle with Whitehouse at the end. He held you off for what was a top 10 finish there in P10. But of course, looking ahead from now to the end of the first half of the season next week, when we head to the Dutch version of Croft, known as Zandvoort Grand Prix, you looking forward to the Dutch circuit?
Yeah, I don't really know how they're going to go. Obviously, the Civic can be very strong on the brakes, as it generally is once we get those dialed in. Corner wise, it might be a bit of a free for all, but there's some long straights there where the Elantra and the Audi are going to pip us. I think the Civic's the slowest in a straight line, so it'd be a case of we'll have to wait and see really on practice nights, and come the race, it might be a case of. Thing is, being towards the top of the points, I'm trying to take a Colin Turkington-esque approach and try and score as many points as I can without getting too many risky battles.
Oh, indeed. Well, we look forward to seeing whether you can carry Turkington's approach through to Zandvoort. But just before we do let you go, is there anybody you'd like to give a thank you to or a shout out live on air tonight?
Yeah, just as always, obviously NXTGEN for doing everything, hosting the platform, yourself for the comms, and everyone who takes part, because without this, none of us would be here. So, yeah, good. Thank you to everyone who's involved at the minute, and any of the sponsors who watch.
Oh, well, I'm sure they all do appreciate it, Jamie, as we do appreciate you giving us your time in the interview room. But with that, thank you for joining us in the interview room. Congratulations on your 2 wins today, and we look forward to seeing you out on circuit in a week's time.
See you later, mate. And Martin, I can't wait for the ice cream.
You can hold him to
it. Cheers, bud.
So hearing that from Jamie Dorey, our pro driver, of course, picking up those 2 wins at the start. I'm very happy with those, and very interesting to hear his perspective on the racing dynamic of the Honda Civic versus the Audi in his battles with Gavan Gardner in both races 1 and 2. The idea of having to work within that initial window to take advantage of the fact the Audi took longer to get up to temperature, and then being wary of when the Audi became the stronger car, but also the fact that Oulton Park really catered for all 4 of the touring car racing class cars, albeit perhaps not quite there for the Elantra, but still, again, Dorey having that really locked in terms of what the Civic could and could not do. Race 3 being unfortunate, of course, but it did lead to that great little battle in the end between Dorey and Whitehouse, seeing Whitehouse pick up his first top 10 of what is the season, I do believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, or definitely at Oulton Park. But with that, we now come on to our third interview for this evening, and that is Matthew Addy. Let's bring him on in to the interview room. Matthew Addy, of course, our pro driver, who's had a bit of a mixed night of fortunes. It was the case, of course, races 1 and 2 didn't go his way, but race 3, a much more positive evening. And as he does join us in the interview room, Matthew, a set of mixed fortunes today at Oulton Park. 15th place in race number 1, 11th in race number 2, but then a P7 in race number 3. Sort of the best of what you could get tonight, or was it the case there's a lot more out there?
Definitely a lot more out there, to be honest. Yeah, the luck wasn't on my side tonight for sure, but it is a difficult track to pass. I think if it had been at that luck at any other track, I might have managed to get a few places back, but it was just difficult.
Indeed, and speaking of that difficulty, from the outset, it looked as though it was going to be a difficult day for many, yourself included, in qualifying in the end. Was it the lap you wanted in qualifying, or was there some more time out there, given in the end you're able to put the car in P8, which was quite strong, but it was a very close field?
It was, yeah, there was definitely more time out there. I've done better times. I just couldn't gel with it tonight for some reason. But I was happy with my qualifying place, to be honest. I could have, even if I kept that in the race or gone, backwards or forwards a couple of places, I would have been happy. But not where I finished up, unfortunately.
Indeed, and in race 1, number 1, of course, having that major knock midway through the race, if I can get my words out in simple English, but there's a bit of a knock there, and of course, when it all goes wrong at Oulton Park, it definitely goes wrong. The car falls apart.
Absolutely, yeah. I made a good start, to be honest, and just tucked up behind Lee Horn. But second corner, he just had a bit too much speed, I think, and backed off the throttle. But I had to take avoiding action, which the cars just passed by me so quick. I was dead last. Yeah, I had that contact about mid-race as well. I was just trying to overtake a slower car, really, and just caught the back of him, unfortunately. But it's the way it is.
Indeed, but still, you didn't let it daunt you, carrying through into race number 2. We did see you come fighting back up to P11 at come the end. Race number 2, a bit more of a positive race.
It was. I think I could have done a bit more again, but got taken out by a Tom Delaney that was spinning through the grass somewhere. The contact wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I was on the brakes heavy, but again, it definitely lost me a couple of places really. But it was the best I could get out of the situation.
Oh, indeed. And speaking of trying to get the best out of a situation, race number 3 saw you go from P11 to P7 come the finish. Obviously, a race interrupted by multiple safety cars, but you seem to be able to capitalise on most of the misfortune of others.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what I was going to take from that race, to be honest. Just by my time, I knew that it was going to be race threes are always that got a conflict really. Just biding my time, really picking them off one by one. It was just a shame at the end. Lee got a good run on me. There was a tiny little bit of contact which just nudged me onto the grass, and I lost the 2 places, unfortunately. Otherwise, I could have taken 5th in that. I was hoping the safety cars would have been out for a little bit longer, to be honest, but sadly not.
Well, it was unfortunate to lose out in the 2 places right at the end, but still, we saw the resolve in you digging deep throughout the evening. And of course, we head to the Dutch version of Croft in a week's time, Zandvoort Grand Prix circuit. Your thoughts on the circuit?
Yeah, I really like that actually. I've done GT3 races there, and yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. So it's going to be definitely a good touring car track. I just need to capitalise on the points when they're on the board, really. So hopefully a good one.
Well, we do look forward to seeing you take on the Dutch circuit in a week's time. But just before we do let you go, is there anyone you'd like to give a thank you to or a shout out live on air tonight?
No, just thanks to you and NXTGEN really for putting this on. It's not easy, obviously, organising everyone, and there's a lot of hot-headed people, but it's good. Yeah, love it.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear, Matthew, and it is our pleasure. And with that, it has been a pleasure to have you in the interview room, and we do wish you all the best in your preparations for next week's round.
Thanks, Paul. Take care.
All the best. So hearing there from Matthew Addy, a pretty straightforward evening for himself in terms of things did not work out the way he wanted them to with regards to those multiple incidents in both race 1 and race number 2. But the key thing, of course, being continuing to look upwards and in the end battling for P5 in race number 3, only to lose out right at the end with a little bit of contact sending him to the grass. But still, do really appreciate that at the end of the day, Addy trying to take each and every point he can from the races. And we do know he's got a lot of pace under the hood of that Honda. The Pro Driver's just got to have an evening where he's able to bring it about, but I'm sure it will come soon. But with that, it is the case now. We come on to our final interviewee of the evening, Paul Scott. And, well, Paul Scott, of course, being a driver who's had quite the positive evening from the perspective of racing in the Pro-Am class. Let's bring him into the interview room. So as he joins us in the interview room now, Paul, it looks like it's been quite the positive evening for yourself. Perhaps not quite the perfect evening, given that Ben Bennyworth was able to pip you to the line on occasion, but still a strong showing from the Audi in your very capable hands. I think a good night on reflection.
Yeah, I had a bit of bad luck the past 2 rounds, but tonight I was quite surprised when I qualified in P3, but I actually put a bit of practice in, and yeah, I finished quite well in all 3 races in the end, I think.
Oh, most definitely. Of course, a P6 in race 1, a P9 in race number 2, and then a 4th place in race number 3. But starting from the beginning, really, after qualifying in P3 and being on that second row, we saw in race number 1 some great battling between yourself and your colleagues around, but most importantly, keeping Ben Bennyworth at bay. Was that always the focus, given the fact that you're both really contesting for the upper portion of the Pro-Am class?
Yeah, definitely. I knew that Andrew and Lee were both pros, and they were directly behind me. The plan was to not let them through, but not battle them if they wanted to come through. And I was hoping that then I could tag onto the back of them, but it turned out that they didn't hold me up, but Ben was able to catch us up quite a lot, and then it was literally just I had to defend for the whole the remaining half of the race. But it was really good racing with Ben.
Oh, indeed. We saw fantastic racing between the two of you in race number 1, and then translating that over into race number 2. Not quite the race you wanted it to be in terms of the way it played out. A few knocks and bumps.
A couple, yeah. I can't remember anything particular. I was quite happy with the second race as well, just in the fact that when I looked at the finishes, I finished on the podium, I think, in the Pro-Ams again. So that's the way I looked at it, even though I may have finished, it may say 9th, but you've got 5 or 6 pros ahead of me. So it's still a half decent result.
Oh, most definitely. A P2 effective on the podium in the prime class there. And just with regards to that race number 2, we did see towards the end you running in a trio of Ben Bennyworth at the front in P7, Lee Horn in P8, and then yourself in P9. It looked so it was very nip and tuck between the three of you all the way through. Was there not an opportunity of rising? We saw, of course, the Honda quite slow on the straights, but it seemed as though it was gaining from the toe of Bennyworth in front.
Yeah, I did feel like having a go, but to be fair, I never got close enough to Lee to even try it. Lee was a lot better on the brakes than me, a lot better. So I think I just decided in my head I was going to settle for where I was.
Oh, and that's fair in terms of settling because still some major points on the board. And then coming to race number 3, I have to ask firstly, when we did announce that it would be a top 9 reverse grid with yourself being then put on pole for race number 3, what was going through your mind?
I was quite pleased actually. Recently, I've really been able to get away off the line in the car, and first race, second race, got away really well, and sod's law, third race, it bogged down and I was wheel spinning like crazy. And I think I lost 2 or 3 places literally off the line. So, I don't know, a bit of nerves maybe got to me, but yeah, managed to hold it together just about.
Oh, indeed. And just on that start, of course, we bogging down at the very start. We did see Ben Bennyworth try to part the seas between yourself and what was Lee Horn to take the lead. You found yourself on the outside and a very adventurous Ben Bennyworth trying to go all the way around Lee Horn. Just what was it like from your perspective?
Oh, it's such your mind's all over the place because you're looking left, looking right, and yeah, sometimes you've just got to go for it. And I think I definitely played it safe, which is probably one of my downsides. Probably play it a bit too safe sometimes, and yeah, I definitely just held off, knowing I was gonna probably lose an extra place as well. But I just, after the bad luck I've had the past couple of rounds, I just wanted to stay on the track. That was it. That's all I had in my head.
That's understandable. And with, of course, the race being disrupted by multiple safety cars and really only seeing 8 effective minutes of racing, was it the case at the end when we came to the final restart, you're running behind Bennyworth towards the end, battling for what was P3, P4, the win in the Pro-Am class? Was it becoming more of a case of if there's an opportunity, I'll go for it, but otherwise take the points?
Yeah, definitely. After getting the decent set of points in the first and second race, I was in the mindset of let's just make sure you finish the race on the third one because I knew I had good points coming from it. So, I mean, certain parts of the track I could catch Ben up, but then he was better on the brakes than me as well. So it was, if I did go for a move on Ben in that third race, it would have been an ambitious one and probably wouldn't have been worth it.
Oh, indeed, but still some major points, as you say. And now looking ahead to a week's time, where we wrap up the first half of the season at the Dutch version of Croft, known as Zandvoort Grand Prix Circuit. How are you feeling for the Dutch circuit?
I'm looking forward to it. It's a good flowing track. I've done it plenty of times in the GT3. I know we're doing a slightly different revision of the track, but I'm looking forward to it again, especially after tonight anyway.
Well, with that, Paul, congratulations on your results from tonight. And just before we do let you go, is there anyone you'd like to give a shout out to live on air?
The next gen lads, everyone that's turning up to race, Jamie for setting it all up. It's running really, really well, and it's this is what I look forward to all week at the minute. So it's brilliant.
Well, that's brilliant to hear, and a brilliant set of results to go with it today, Paul. Congratulations on your 3 race results, and we look forward to seeing you take to the circuit in a week's time.
You too, mate. Thank you.
All the best. So hearing there from our final interview of Paul Scott, they're very happy of how things proceeded today, the Pro-Am driver, and in that nip and tuck rivalry with Ben Bennyworth, you can imagine that rivalry now will only begin to intensify as the rounds go on, because the two drivers were neck and neck both in the Audi RS3, and Paul there particularly talking about the bad luck he's had over the last couple of rounds, which is true in the fact that things have just not gone his way, but today they did go his way in qualifying, setting that absolutely brilliant P3 lap, and they're not able to quite convert that P3 start into a P3 in the race, but still being able to bring home the results on the podium in the Pro-Am class, some major points up for grabs and keeping him well within arm's reach of being at the top of the Pro-Am class championship as the season goes on. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching. And if you did enjoy tonight's broadcast and you enjoyed the racing, then why not find out more about us at Next Gen Racing Community? Indeed, the series we run, what we do in sim racing and elsewhere in the world of real-world motorsport. And you can find that all out in terms of our new website, and that is at nextgenracing.co.uk. And of course, it is the case. The website recently revamped. It is now the home of clean and fair sim racing for all. So if you do want to find out more, this is the #1 place to go to in terms of Next Gen Racing information. But otherwise, of course, you can go to our official Facebook group, which is at facebook.com/groups/Next Gen Racing. You can get in touch with the administrators, the fellow racers, and everybody else in between and find out what's going on and what's new in the world of the Next Gen Racing community. But with that, it's the case our drivers now will be packing their bags after a short stay in the United Kingdom. For now, they'll be making their way to the Netherlands for round number 5 in a week's time. We'll be going to Circuit Zandvoort for 3 more races to wrap up the first half of the season. It'll be on Thursday, the 1st of September 2022, and you won't want to miss it, because I can tell you now, with the sweeping nature of the corners around here, it will really feel as though these touring car machines will be flying. We've also got some heavy braking zones, we've got some major straights, there's a little something for everybody at Zandvoort, and the racing will only continue to get up close and personal as it has done over the last 4 rounds. But with that, we have been Next Gen Racing. I've been your host and commentator, Paul at TX141 Walsh. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.